My children smiled as they signed me into Magnolia Grove residence, promising it was only for a few weeks. Amanda kissed my cheek like she hadn't just emptied half my closet. Grant avoided my eyes. Claire cried just enough for the receptionist to notice. By sunset, I was sitting alone in a room that smelled like lemon cleaner and strangers. Still, they thought they had finally put me somewhere quiet, somewhere harmless, somewhere I could no longer ask questions about the Sterling family trust, the missing statements, or the luxury cards they had been using like my life's work belonged to them. But 3 days later, those same cards stopped working. And that was when my children discovered their mother had not been abandoned. She had been waiting. If this story touches something in your heart, please like this video and subscribe. I'd love to hear what you would have done in my place. So comment your thoughts, your feelings, and where you're watching from right now, including the time in your city. Before my children learned to swipe luxury cards, before they learned how to smile at bankers and speak in polished voices about family assets, there was only me, a tired young widow with 3 sleeping babies and a kitchen table covered in overdue bills. My name is Rebecca Sterling. And for most of my life, I believed a mother's love meant building a floor beneath her children's feet, even if she had to crawl under it herself and hold it up with both hands. I was 34 when my husband, Thomas, died. People always say the word died as if it is one clean moment, one door closing. But death does not end in a hospital room. It follows you home. It sits in the empty chair at dinner. It waits beside the unpaid mortgage notice. It whispers through the silence when your children ask when Daddy is coming back, and you have to decide whether to lie gently or tell the truth softly enough not to break them. Thomas had been a good man, not rich, not perfect, but steady. He worked as a mechanic at a small repair shop outside Charleston, South Carolina, and he loved our children with the kind of quiet devotion that never needed an audience. Amanda was 9 then, already serious, already trying to act older than she was. Grant was 6, stubborn and proud, always carrying toy trucks in both fists. Claire was only 3, still small enough to fall asleep with her cheek pressed against my shoulder. After the funeral, people brought casseroles, flowers, cards, and promises. Call me if you need anything. We're here for you. You're so strong, Rebecca. But strength, I learned, was often what people called you when they had no intention of helping you carry anything. Within 3 months, the flowers were dead, the casseroles were gone, and I was sitting at my kitchen table with a calculator, a stack of bills, and a fear so heavy I could barely breathe. Thomas had left a small life insurance policy, but not enough to raise 3 children. Not enough to keep the house, pay medical bills, cover school clothes, groceries, braces, field trips, and the 1,000 invisible expenses that come with childhood. I had 2 choices: shrink our lives until there was nothing left, or build something from the grief. So I built. At first, it was not a company. It was survival. A neighbor's mother needed a walker after hip surgery, and the local medical supply store charged more than she could afford. I found a used one, cleaned it, adjusted it, and delivered it myself. Then another family needed a hospital bed for their father. Then someone needed oxygen tubing, shower chairs, compression socks, portable ramps. I started learning everything I could about home care equipment, because I knew what it felt like to be scared in a house that was suddenly too expensive, too quiet, and too full of responsibility. I borrowed a little money from a church friend, converted our garage into storage, and named the business Sterling Home Care Solutions. Back then, the name sounded bigger than the company. The office was my kitchen. The warehouse was the garage. The delivery team was me in an old blue van that coughed every time it started. I packed invoices while Claire colored on the floor. I answered customer calls while stirring soup. I drove across town after midnight because an elderly man's bed rail had broken and his daughter was crying on the phone. I worked until my feet swelled. I worked through colds, migraines, birthdays, holidays, and grief. I worked because Amanda wanted to join the debate team, and the fees were due on Friday. I worked because Grant needed new cleats after his toes pushed through the old ones. I worked because Claire loved art classes, and I could not bear to tell one more child in that house that life had taken something else away from them. For years, my children saw me tired, but I made sure they never saw me defeated. Every morning, I packed their lunches with little notes inside. Every night, I checked homework, folded laundry, returned calls, balanced accounts, and prayed I would not make a mistake big enough to ruin us. Sometimes, after everyone went to bed, I sat in the hallway between their rooms just to listen to them breathe. That sound was the reason I kept going. Amanda grew into a beautiful, ambitious girl who liked things neat, expensive, and under control. She hated the old van. She hated when I showed up at school in work clothes. Once, when she was 16, she asked me not to come inside for a parent meeting because I smelled like rubber wheels and disinfectant. I remember laughing like it did not hurt. Then I went home and cried in the garage between stacked boxes of bed pads and walkers. Grant was different. He never complained about the van, but he hated looking poor. He was always watching other boys' fathers, their watches, their cars, the way people treated men who seemed important. When he was in high school, he told me he was going to be rich enough that no one would ever pity him again. I thought that was determination. I did not understand yet that shame, when left untreated, can grow into hunger. Claire was my softest child. She painted on everything: notebook covers, paper bags, old cardboard boxes from my deliveries. She had Thomas's eyes and my mother's hands. She could make anything look beautiful. But she also learned early that tears softened me. If Amanda pushed and Grant argued, Claire simply looked wounded, and I would reach for my checkbook before she even finished asking. I told myself that each child needed love in a different language. Amanda needed opportunity. Grant needed confidence. Claire needed encouragement. And I gave and gave until giving became the only way I knew how to be their mother. Sterling Home Care Solutions grew slowly. Then, all at once, a hospital discharge planner referred families to me. Then a rehabilitation center. Then 2 senior communities. I hired my first employee, then my second. We moved out of the garage into a small storefront. I learned contracts, insurance billing, vendor negotiations, payroll, tax. I made mistakes, corrected them, stayed honest, and built a reputation one customer at a time. By the time Amanda left for business school in North Carolina, I could pay her tuition without selling the house. I told her, focus on studying. Don't worry about the money. She hugged me quickly, already looking over my shoulder at the campus buildings. You're the best. Mom, she said. At the time, I believed she meant it. Grant wanted to study real estate and finance. He said property was where real wealth lived. I helped him through college, then helped him with his first investment course, then his licensing fees. When he wanted seed money for a small project after graduation, I gave him more than I should have. He promised he would double it. I did not need him to double it. I only wanted him to feel capable. Claire chose art school in Savannah. People warned me it was impractical, but I had spent too many years being practical. I wanted one of my children to live in color, so I paid for tuition, supplies, rent, and later, when she said she needed a studio space to be taken seriously, I helped with that too. Every check I wrote felt like a blessing then. Every sacrifice felt holy. That is the dangerous thing about motherhood. Sometimes you can mistake being needed for being loved. As the years passed, my children's thank yous became shorter. Their requests became larger. Amanda stopped asking if I could help and started saying, "I'll need you to cover this for now." Grant began speaking about my money as if it were lazy money, just sitting there waiting for someone smarter to put it to use. Claire would call me crying from boutiques, airports, galleries, always in some small emergency that only my credit card could solve. Still, I defended them. When my friend Marjorie said, "Rebecca, those children are grown now," I smiled and said, "They're just finding their way." When my accountant raised an eyebrow at the family expenses, I said, "I'd rather help them while I'm alive than make them wait until I'm gone." When my attorney, Jonathan Pierce, suggested a stronger family trust with limits and protections, I almost took offense. "They're my children," I told him. Jonathan looked at me for a long moment and said, "That is exactly why you need clear boundaries." I signed the documents, but in my heart, I thought he was being too cautious. I had no idea those pages would one day become the only wall standing between me and the people I had raised. For my 68th birthday, Amanda hosted dinner at a private club overlooking the harbor. She wore pearls and introduced me to her friends as the founder of our family's success. Grant arrived late in a tailored suit, talking loudly into his phone about closing a deal. Claire brought flowers she had bought with the card linked to my account. They toasted me that night. "To Mom," Amanda said, lifting her glass. "The woman who built the sterling name." Everyone clapped. I smiled. But later, when the waiter placed the bill near my daughter instead of me, Amanda slid it across the table without even looking. "Mom will take care of it," she said. Not cruelly, not even with embarrassment, just naturally, as if the whole world already understood my role. That was the first time I felt something inside me shifts. I looked around that table at the 3 children I had carried through grief, hunger, fear, school, heartbreak, and adulthood. They were polished now, educated, well-dressed, confident. They had the kind of lives I had once prayed they would have. But somewhere along the way, they had stopped seeing the hands that built those lives. They saw the company. They saw the house. They saw the trust. They saw the cards. And I, Rebecca Sterling, their mother, had become the quiet signature behind it all. I wish I could say I confronted them that night. I wish I stood up, took back my card, and told them love did not mean unlimited access. But I did what mothers like me too often do. I paid the bill. I hugged each of them goodbye. Then I drove home alone through the Charleston streets, past the gas lamps and old oaks, with my hands trembling on the steering wheel. At a red light, I looked at myself in the rearview mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked tired, not from work this time, from being used. That night, I opened the drawer where I kept my trust documents. I did not read them yet. I only placed my hand on the folder and remembered Jonathan's warning: clear boundaries. I had spent my whole life building a legacy for my children. I had not yet understood that one day I would need that legacy to protect me from them. The first time Amanda asked to use one of my business cards, she did it with such elegance that I almost admired the performance. We were sitting in my sunroom on a Sunday afternoon. The light was soft across the floorboards, the kind of light that used to make me feel grateful for everything I had survived. Amanda had come over wearing a cream-colored blazer, gold earrings, and the expression she used whenever she wanted something but did not want to sound like she was asking. "Mom," she said, stirring her tea, though she had not added sugar. "I've been invited to a charity luncheon at the Harbor Club next month. That sounds nice?" I said, "It's more than nice. It's important. There will be hospital board members there, donors, people connected to elder care foundations. Honestly, it could be good for Sterling Home Care Solutions too." That was Amanda's gift. She never made a request sound selfish. She wrapped it in opportunity, polished it with strategy, and placed it in front of me like a business decision. "What do you need?" I asked. She smiled. "Just the company card for a few expenses. Table sponsorship. Dress. Maybe a few client dinners. Nothing extravagant. Nothing extravagant." That phrase would become one of the most expensive lies in my family. I gave her the card because I wanted to believe her. I told myself she was representing the family, representing the company, representing everything I had built. And when the statement came the next month, I stared at the charges longer than I should have. A boutique downtown, a private styling appointment, a dinner bill large enough to feed a family of 5 for 2 weeks, a spa charge marked as professional preparation. When I called Amanda, she laughed lightly. "Oh, Mom, image matters in those rooms. You can't walk in looking like you don't belong." I should have said, "You do not need my money to belong." Instead, I said, "Just be careful next time." There was always a next time. Grant's requests came differently. He never dressed them up in pearls and charity language. He came with folders, charts, numbers, projections. He would spread papers across my kitchen table and speak in a low, urgent voice, as if we were partners in something too sophisticated for ordinary people to understand. "This coastal condo project is temporary leverage," he told me one evening. "The location is perfect. The developer is under pressure. If I can get in now, the upside is huge." "How much are you asking for?" I said. He looked down, tapped a pen against the paper, then named an amount that made my stomach tighten. "Grant, I know it sounds big, but this is how wealth grows. Money sitting in accounts loses power. Real estate builds legacy." That word caught me. Legacy. My children had learned that certain words opened doors in me. Family, future, security, legacy. They spoke them like passwords, and I kept unlocking myself. I told Grant I would help him once, but it had to be treated like a loan. He kissed my forehead, something he rarely did, and said, "You won't regret this, Mom." For a while, he sent me updates, construction delays, permit issues, market shifts, temporary setbacks. Then the updates became shorter. Then they stopped unless I asked. When I did ask, he sounded irritated, as if my concern was an insult to his intelligence. "Mom, you have to let me handle my business. My business. With my money." Claire was the easiest to excuse because she always sounded wounded before I had the chance to be angry. She called from Savannah one night, crying so hard I could barely understand her. "My gallery opportunity is falling apart," she said. "The lighting is wrong. The framing costs doubled. And if I cancel, people will never take me seriously again." "How much do you need?" I asked, already reaching for the notebook where I tracked family expenses. She sniffed. "I hate asking you." But she did ask, again and again, for studio rent, for canvases, for designer dresses she said were necessary for gallery openings, for flights to meet curators who never seemed to buy anything. Claire could turn dependence into vulnerability. She made me feel cruel for noticing the pattern. At first, I told myself these were separate problems. Amanda needed status for business circles. Grant needed capital to establish himself. Claire needed support because artists lived uncertain lives. I had 3 different children with 3 different needs. But slowly, those needs began to gather around me like hands reaching into the same pocket. The family dinners changed first. When the children were young, our table had been noisy and imperfect. Amanda complained about vegetables. Grant kicked the chair legs. Claire spilled juice and cried before anyone scolded her. Thomas would wink at me over their heads, and I would feel exhausted but full. Now the dinners were quieter, cleaner, more expensive, and somehow emptier. They no longer asked about my day unless it led to a question about the company. They no longer asked whether my knees hurt, whether I had slept, whether I had seen my friends from church. They asked about accounts, properties, tax planning, investment returns. One Friday evening, I invited them to my house for roast chicken, green beans, and sweet potato casserole, the kind of dinner they used to love. Amanda arrived with a bottle of wine I knew she had charged to my account. Grant came 20 minutes late, still on his phone. Claire wore a silk scarf and kissed the air beside my cheek instead of kissing me. We sat at the dining table beneath the old brass chandelier Thomas had installed himself. I had lit candles. I had taken out the good plates. I had even made peach cobbler because Grant loved it as a boy. For 15 minutes. It almost felt like family. Then Amanda placed her wine glass down and said, "Mom, have you thought any more about simplifying your responsibilities?" I looked at her. "What responsibilities?" "The house, the company, the trust, all of it." She smiled gently. "You shouldn't have so much on your shoulders at your age." "At my age," I repeated. Grant leaned forward. "It's not an insult. Mom, it's practical. There's equity trapped in this house. You have assets that could be working more efficiently." Claire touched my hand. "We just worry about you here alone." The word worry sounded soft, but there was something hard underneath it. "I've lived in this house for 40 years, I said. I know every step, every railing, every corner. That doesn't mean it's safe, Amanda replied. Grant nodded toward the staircase. One fall could change everything. I set my fork down. I have not fallen. No one says you have, Claire whispered. But sometimes things happen quickly. I looked from one face to the next. My children, all grown, all polished, all speaking carefully, too carefully. Their concern did not feel spontaneous. It felt rehearsed. Amanda folded her hands. There are beautiful senior residences now, not nursing homes like people imagine, luxury communities, private rooms, dining, activities, medical support. I stared at her. Amanda, are you suggesting I leave my home? She exhaled as if I were being difficult. I'm suggesting we plan before there's a crisis, Grant added. And we should talk about financial access too, just in case. Power of attorney. Emergency authority. Trust management. There it was. Not my health. Access. The room seemed to narrow around me. I could hear the ice settling in Amanda's glass. I could hear Claire's bracelet tapping softly against the table. I could hear Thomas's old clock ticking in the hallway. I looked at my children and felt, for the first time, afraid of them. Not because they were shouting, because they were not. Because they had learned to make greed sound like care. I'm not ready to discuss this tonight, I said. Amanda's mouth tightened. Mom, avoiding it won't make it disappear. Grant's voice sharpened. You always taught us to be responsible. This is responsibility. Claire's eyes filled with tears. Why does it feel like you don't trust us? That almost broke me. Not the question itself, but the way she asked it. As if my hesitation was betrayal. As if I had wounded them by not handing over the keys to my life. I do trust you, I said quietly, and even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were no longer completely true. After dinner, Amanda and Grant carried plates to the kitchen while Claire went upstairs to use the bathroom. I stayed near the dining room, gathering napkins with hands that would not stop trembling. That was when I heard them. They thought the water running in the sink covered their voices. But old houses carry sound in strange ways. Grant said, She's getting stubborn. Amanda answered, She's scared. That's different. She won't sign if you push too hard. I know how to handle Mom. Then Claire's voice, softer, from the hallway near the kitchen. Maybe we should slow down, Amanda said. We don't have time to slow down. Grant muttered something I could not catch. Then Amanda said the sentence that made the blood in my body feel cold. If Mom signs one more form, everything becomes easier. I stood frozen beside the dining room wall, one hand gripping a cloth napkin, the other pressed against my chest. One more form. Everything becomes easier. Not safer for Mom. Not better for Mom. Easier. For them. I stepped back before they could see me. My heart was pounding so hard I felt it in my throat. I walked to the powder room, closed the door, and stared at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was still a mother. But something else had awakened behind her eyes. I did not confront them when they left. I kissed each cheek. I accepted Amanda's careful hug, Grant's distracted goodbye, Claire's tearful squeeze. Then I locked the door behind them. For a long time, I stood in the quiet house, listening to the silence they had left behind. After midnight, I went to my bedroom, opened the drawer of my nightstand, and took out a leather journal Thomas had given me on our 15th anniversary. I had never used it much. A few recipes, a few memories, a pressed flower from Claire's childhood. That night, I turned to a blank page and wrote the date. Then I wrote every word I remembered. Amanda asked about senior residence. Grant mentioned power of attorney and trust management. Claire pressured emotionally. Overheard in kitchen. If Mom signs one more form, everything becomes easier. My hand shook as I wrote. But I did not stop. Because for the first time in my life, I was not writing down what my children needed from me. I was writing down what I might need to protect myself from them. A week after that dinner, Amanda called me at exactly 8:15 in the morning. I remember the time because I was standing in my kitchen, pouring coffee into the chipped blue mug Thomas had bought me at a roadside shop in Myrtle Beach. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet I used to love. But since that Friday night, every silence felt like it was hiding something. "Good morning, Mom," Amanda said brightly. Too brightly. "Morning, sweetheart." I talked to Grant and Claire, and we found an opening with Dr. Patricia Lowell this Thursday. I paused with the coffee pot still in my hand. An opening for what a wellness evaluation. The words were soft, polished, harmless. But I had been a businesswoman long enough to know that dangerous things often arrive wearing harmless names. "What kind of wellness evaluation?" I asked. Amanda sighed, as if she had expected resistance and already found it exhausting. "Mom, please don't make this unpleasant. It's just a basic appointment. Memory, balance, medication review, general safety. At your age, it's responsible. At your age." Those 3 words had become a small knife my children kept slipping between my ribs. "I already see Dr. Lowell for my yearly checkups," I said. "My last one was 6 months ago." "I know, but a lot can change in 6 months. Amanda, nothing has changed." There was a brief silence. Then her voice lowered into that gentle tone she used when she wanted to sound loving in case someone else was listening. "Mom, last month you forgot where you put your keys. I misplaced them in the laundry room, and you mixed up Claire's gallery date. Claire changed that date 3 times, and Grant said you seemed confused about one of the trust statements. That made me still." Grant had brought a trust statement to dinner months earlier, asking why a transfer had not cleared. I told him there was no transfer because I had not approved one. He called it confusion then, too. I thought he was irritated. Now I wondered if he had been planting a seed. I was not confused. I said, "I'm not saying you were." Amanda replied quickly, "But wouldn't it be better to have documentation that way nobody can question anything later?" "Nobody. Or you." I did not say it. Not yet. By Thursday morning, all 3 of my children had arranged their schedules as if escorting me to a doctor's office were a sacred family duty. Amanda arrived first, carrying a leather folder. Grant came next in a dark suit, talking into his phone until he reached my front steps. Claire showed up last, eyes pink, as if she had spent the morning crying over something that had not happened yet. "You all didn't have to come," I said. Amanda smiled. "Of course we did." Grant jingled his car keys. "We just want to get this done." Claire wrapped her arms around me. "We love you." "Mom." The hug should have comforted me. Instead, it felt like a curtain being drawn before a performance. "Doctor." Patricia Lowell's office was in a quiet medical building near downtown Charleston, with framed prints of marsh grass on the walls and a receptionist who had known me for years. I had chosen Dr. Lowell because she never rushed me. She listened. She looked people in the eye. She had treated me through high blood pressure, arthritis flare-ups, sleepless grief, and all the ordinary betrayals of aging. When we walked in, Dr. Lowell stepped into the waiting room herself. "Rebecca," she said warmly. "It's good to see you." Then her eyes moved to my children. Amanda extended her hand. "Thank you so much for fitting us in. We've been concerned." "Doctor." Lowell did not take the bait. She shook Amanda's hand politely, then looked back at me. "And how are you feeling? I feel like everyone has decided something about me before asking me," I said. Grant shifted beside me. Claire looked down. Amanda laughed lightly. "Mom is joking." "No," I said. "I'm not." That was the first time I saw Dr. Lowell truly study the room. She invited all of us into her office at first. Amanda sat closest to the desk, placing her leather folder in her lap. Grant stood for a moment before sitting, as if chairs were beneath him. Claire took the seat next to me and held my hand. "Doctor?" Lowell opened my chart. "So tell me what concerns brought you in." Amanda began immediately. "Well, we've noticed some forgetfulness. Small things, but concerning. Keys, dates, financial details." Grant leaned forward. "And she's alone in that big house. Stairs, old wiring, deliveries coming and going. We think it's time to consider safer living arrangements." Claire squeezed my hand. "We don't want something terrible to happen." "Doctor." Lowell listened without interrupting. She made a few notes, then turned to me. "Rebecca, what do you think?" "I think my children are confusing aging with incompetence," I said. "I misplaced keys because I live in a house with 12 rooms. I mixed up Claire's gallery date because she changed it. And the financial detail Grant mentioned was not confusion. It was refusal." Grant's jaw tightened. Amanda's smile thinned. "Doctor," Lowell noticed. "What did you refuse?" she asked. "A transfer connected to the family trust," I said, because I had not approved it. Amanda quickly opened her folder. "That's actually one of the reasons we're worried. Mom has been under a lot of stress, and sometimes stress can make financial management overwhelming." I turned to look at my daughter. There she sat, perfectly dressed, perfectly calm, making me sound fragile in a room where I had walked in on my own 2 feet. For a moment, I remembered her at 9 years old after Thomas died, standing in the hallway in her pajamas, asking me if we would have to move. I remembered kneeling in front of her and promising that I would keep the family safe. Now she was using that family as a reason to take safety away from me. "Doctor." Lowell closed the folder Amanda had pushed toward her without reading it. I'd like to speak with Rebecca alone, she said. Amanda blinked. We can stay. It might help to have context. I have enough context for now. Grant stood. Doctor. With respect. Doctor, Lowell said. Calm, but firm. Rebecca is my patient. That silenced him. Claire looked at me with frightened eyes, as if I had caused this by not playing my role properly. Then all three of them left the room. When the door closed, my body sagged with a breath I had not realized I was holding. Doctor, Lowell's voice softened. Rebecca, do you feel safe at home? The question nearly undid me, not because I feared someone would strike me, not because I thought my children would break a window or raise a fist, but because safety is not only about locked doors. Sometimes danger comes with a daughter's kiss, a son's paperwork, another daughter's tears. I don't know anymore. I said, Doctor. Lowell rolled her chair closer. Tell me. So I did. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. I told her about the dinner, about the sudden talk of senior residences, about power of attorney, trust management, and the phrase I had overheard in the kitchen. If Mom signs one more form, everything becomes easier. Doctor. Lowell's face changed when I said that. She did not gasp. She did not dramatize. But something in her expression sharpened. Have they asked you to sign documents? Yes. Have you signed any not financial authority? Not yet. Good. That one word carried more warning than comfort. Then she performed the evaluation my children had wanted me to fail. She asked me the date, the year, the city, the president, the location of her office. She gave me 5 words to remember and asked me to repeat them later. She asked me to draw a clock, count backward, explain a proverb, follow a 3-step instruction. She reviewed my medications, blood pressure, gait, reflexes. I answered every question. I remembered every word. I drew the clock with the hands exactly where she asked. When she finished, she sat across from me and said, Rebecca, you are not showing signs of cognitive impairment. I looked down at my hands. They were older now, veined and thin-skinned, but they had signed payroll checks, held dying customers' hands, packed school lunches, built a company, buried a husband, and raised 3 children. Those hands were not confused. They were tired. I need that in writing. I said, Doctor? Lowell nodded. I assumed you would. Before we left, she asked if there was someone I trusted, someone outside my children. Yes, I said. My attorney. Jonathan Pierce? Call him today. I planned to. She printed the preliminary evaluation and told me the formal report would be sent securely to both me and Jonathan, if I authorized it. I signed that authorization with a steadier hand than I had expected. When my children came back into the room, Amanda searched Doctor Lowell's face for victory. She did not find it. Your mother is doing well. Doctor, Lowell said, I see no medical basis today for questioning her capacity. Grant looked away. Claire's mouth trembled. Amanda's smile returned, but it looked painted on. That's wonderful news, she said. Wonderful. As if she had not come hoping for something else. On the ride home, no one said much. Amanda drove. Grant answered emails in the passenger seat. Claire sat beside me in the back, staring out the window. I watched Charleston pass by in bright, indifferent sunlight. At one point, Amanda said, "Well, at least now we know." I looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror. "Yes," I said, "now we know." She thought I meant my health. I meant them. That afternoon, after they dropped me home and left with stiff hugs and false smiles, I locked the front door and went straight to my desk. I took out Jonathan Pierce's card from the small brass holder where it had sat for years. My hands did not tremble this time. When his assistant answered, I said, "This is Rebecca Sterling. Please tell Jonathan I need the earliest appointment possible. It concerns the Sterling Family Trust, my medical capacity, and possible coercion." The word sounded strange in my mouth. Coercion. But it also sounded true. Then I opened my leather journal and wrote everything down: the appointment, the questions, Amanda's folder, Grant's impatience, Claire's tears, doctor, Lowell's findings. At the bottom of the page, I wrote one sentence and underlined it twice. They wanted proof I was weak. I got proof I was not. For the first time in weeks. The house did not feel quite as lonely. It felt like it was listening. And maybe, in its own old way, standing with me. The meeting happened 2 days after I spoke with Jonathan Pierce. I had expected him to sound alarmed when I told him about the doctor's appointment, Amanda's folder, Grant's remarks about the trust, and Claire's tears that always seemed to arrive at the exact moment I began defending myself. But Jonathan had been my attorney for nearly 20 years. He had the calm voice of a man who had seen greed wear every costume. "Rebecca," he said, "do not sign anything your children put in front of you without sending it to me first." "I know." "No," he said gently. "I need you to hear me. Not even if they say it is temporary. Not even if they say it is only medical. Not even if one of them cries." That last sentence settled in my chest like a stone. "Do you think they would really hurt me?" I asked. Jonathan was quiet for a moment. "I think people can convince themselves they are doing the right thing when money is on the other side of the door." I looked across my study at the framed photograph of my children when they were little. Amanda in pigtails, Grant missing his 2 front teeth, Claire holding a stuffed rabbit by one ear. I had kept that photo on my desk for decades as proof that every hard day had been worth it. Now it felt like evidence from another life. "What do I do?" I asked. "For now?" "You listen. You document. You let them talk. And if they present papers, you may accept copies, but you do not give them authority. If you feel pressured, call me immediately." Then he added something that made my mouth go dry. "Rebecca, if they are trying to establish incapacity and financial control, the next step may be a family meeting." It was almost as if my children were following a script Jonathan had already read. Amanda called the following evening. "Mom, we need to sit down as a family," she said. There it was. A family meeting. Yes. Nothing dramatic. Just us. We need to make a plan that gives everyone peace of mind. Everyone. I wondered when my peace of mind had stopped counting. Friday evening. I said, "At my house?" "Perfect," Amanda replied. Too quickly. "Grant and Claire will be there." I assumed they would. There was a pause. "Mom, I hope you'll come into this with an open heart." I looked down at the journal lying open on my desk. My heart has always been open. "Amanda," I said, "that was never the problem. On Friday, I prepared the house the way I always had when my children came over. Habit is a stubborn thing. Even when your heart knows danger is coming, your hands still reach for the good plates. I roasted chicken. I made a salad. I baked biscuits from scratch because Grant loved them. Then, halfway through setting the table, I stopped. Why was I feeding people who were coming to take from me? I stood there with a cloth napkin in my hand, feeling foolish and old. Then I folded the napkin anyway, not because they deserved it, but because I refused to let their behavior make me forget who I was. Amanda arrived first, dressed in navy blue, carrying a slim leather portfolio. She kissed my cheek and looked around the foyer the way real estate agents look at houses they are about to list. "You've moved the rug," she said. "I had it cleaned. It makes the hallway look smaller." I did not answer. Grant came in behind her, holding a stack of folders under one arm. He smelled of expensive cologne and impatience. "Hey, Mom," he said, giving me a quick hug. Claire arrived last, with flowers from a grocery store. The price sticker was still on the plastic wrap. She handed them to me with damp eyes. "I just want tonight to go well," she whispered. I almost asked, "For whom instead?" I put the flowers in water. Dinner was unbearable because everyone pretended it was normal. Amanda asked about the weather. Grant complimented the biscuits. Claire said the chicken reminded her of childhood, then looked like she might cry over the memory. I watched them perform affection with such effort that I nearly pitied them. Nearly. After dinner, Amanda cleared her throat. "Maybe we should move to the living room." There was no, "If you're ready, Mom." No, "Would you like to talk?" Just a gentle command disguised as suggestion. I took my tea and sat in Thomas's old armchair. Amanda and Grant sat on the sofa opposite me. Claire chose the ottoman near my feet, close enough to touch my knee whenever she wanted to soften me. Amanda opened the leather portfolio. "Mom?" We all agree that the doctor's appointment went well. I smiled faintly. "Do we?" Grant shifted. "That's not what this is about." "No," I asked. Amanda held up one hand. "Please, let's not start defensively. We're here because we love you." There it was again. Love, placed carefully at the entrance of a trap. She pulled out a printed brochure and slid it across the coffee table. Magnolia Grove Residence. The front showed white columns, bright flowers, smiling seniors drinking tea beneath oak trees. It looked less like a care facility and more like a resort for people whose families wanted to feel less guilty. "I did not touch it," Amanda continued. "This is one of the best senior living residences in the Charleston area. Private suites, medical staff, chef-prepared meals, activities, transportation. It's not what you're imagining." "What am I imagining?" I asked. Claire reached for my hand. "Mom, please don't look at it like we're trying to abandon you." I pulled my hand gently away. I have not said that word. Grant leaned forward, elbows on knees. The house is too much. The stairs are steep. The maintenance is constant. You still have delivery people from the company coming by sometimes. It's not practical. I have managed this house longer than you have been alive. And that's exactly the point, Amanda said. You shouldn't have to manage it anymore. A strange laugh almost escaped me. Shouldn't have to. As if they were relieving me of a burden rather than removing me from my home. And how long would I be at Magnolia Grove? I asked. Amanda's eyes flicked toward Grant. Just a few weeks at first, she said. A trial period. While we arrange some repairs here and review the financial structure. What repairs? Grant opened one of his folders. The roof inspection showed potential issues. The back steps need work. There are electrical updates that should be considered. Should be considered. I repeated. Have you scheduled contractors? Not yet, he said, but we can move faster if we have authority to coordinate everything. Amanda slid another document onto the table. This would allow us to assist with logistics. I looked at the title, Durable Power of Attorney. My tea suddenly tasted metallic. Claire's hand covered her mouth, as though the paper itself hurt her. It's just paperwork. Mom, Amanda said softly. It does not mean you're losing control. Jonathan's voice came back to me. Not even if they say it is temporary. What kind of control would it give you? I asked. Amanda smiled with patient sadness. Only what we would need to help you. That is not an answer. Grant exhaled sharply. Mom, do you want us to help or not? I want honesty. The room went still. Amanda's expression cooled. Honesty, fine. Honestly, we are exhausted. We all have families, careers, responsibilities. We cannot keep waiting for a crisis. You raised us to plan ahead, and now you're punishing us for doing exactly that. I am not punishing anyone. It feels like you are, Claire whispered. Of course it did. To people accustomed to access. A boundary feels like cruelty. Amanda leaned closer. Mom, if something happens and we do not have the authority to act, everything becomes harder. Bills, medical decisions, property issues. The trust. I said. Grant's eyes dropped to the carpet. Amanda paused just a second too long. Yes, she said. The trust too. It is part of the bigger picture. And this is why you want me at Magnolia Grove. Claire began to cry. Mom, how can you think that? Because none of you asked me what I wanted. I said, silence. I looked at each of them. My beautiful children, my expensive children, my children who had learned to speak in legal phrases before learning how to ask if I was lonely. Amanda pushed the pen toward me. Just sign the temporary care authorization tonight. We can send the rest to Jonathan if that makes you feel better. She said Jonathan's name with a little edge, as if my attorney had become the villain simply because he stood between her and my signature. I picked up the pen. All three of them watched my hand. It was the most honest moment of the evening. Not one of them looked at my face. Not Amanda, not Grant, not even Claire. They watched the pen. So I gave them what Jonathan and I had already discussed. I signed the medical transportation consent. I signed the temporary residence inquiry form. I signed a limited release allowing Magnolia Grove to speak with Dr. Lowell about medication lists and dietary needs. I did not sign the power of attorney. I did not sign trust management authority. I did not sign property authorization. Amanda's smile returned when she saw ink on paper, but she did not examine each document carefully. Greed made her careless. Relief made Grant careless. Tears made Claire careless. They believed a mother's surrender would look quiet. So I made my resistance quiet too. When they left that night, Amanda hugged me longer than usual. "This is the right thing," she whispered. Grant said, "You'll see. Everything will be easier." There was that word again. Easier. Claire kissed my cheek and said, "Please don't be mad at us." I stood in the doorway as they walked to their cars. The porch light shone on Amanda's leather portfolio under her arm. She looked satisfied. Grant looked relieved. Claire looked guilty, but not guilty enough to stop. After their taillights disappeared, I locked the door and went straight to the copier in my study. I made duplicates of every paper they had brought. Then I scanned them to Jonathan with a short message. They made their move tonight. Within 10 minutes, he replied. Do not stay alone with them when they come to move you. Call me before you leave the house. I sat at my desk, staring at those words until the screen blurred. Move you. Not help you. Move you. For the first time, I understood that my children were no longer asking me to make a plan. They had already made one, and I was the only person in the family still pretending it was about love. They came for me on a Tuesday morning, not Sunday, when families visit after church. Not Friday, when the week is ending and people feel tender. Tuesday, a practical day, a day for errands, appointments, banking, paperwork, a day for moving an old woman out of her own life. Amanda had called the night before to say everything was arranged. Just pack a small bag, she said. Magnolia Grove provides most things. You don't need to overthink it. Overthink it. As if choosing what pieces of your life to carry into exile was a minor inconvenience. How long did you say I would be there? I asked. A few weeks. Mom, we talked about this. No. I said, you talked. I listened. There was silence on the line. Then Amanda softened her voice. I know this is emotional for you, but we're doing the right thing. That sentence had become her shield. Every time I questioned her, she hid behind righteousness. After we hung up, I did what she told me to do. I packed a small bag, but not the way she expected. I placed 3 blouses inside, 2 pairs of slacks, my robe, my slippers, my medication organizer, my Bible, and a framed photograph of Thomas I kept beside my bed. Then I stopped and looked around my room. My wedding quilt lay folded across the bench at the foot of the bed. Thomas's watch was still in the top drawer. The pearl earrings he had given me for our 20th anniversary sat in a velvet box. In the closet were dresses from weddings, graduations, funerals, holidays. In the hallway were family photographs Amanda had once asked me to remove because they made the house look dated. What does a woman take when her children tell her she is only leaving temporarily? But her heart knows they are lying. I wanted to pack everything. I wanted to pack nothing. In the end, I packed the truth. I placed my journal at the bottom of the suitcase, beneath my folded clothes. Then I tucked in copies of Dr. Lowell's evaluation, the signed limited medical forms, and a sealed envelope Jonathan had sent by courier the previous afternoon. His note was short. Call me the moment you arrive. Do not discuss the trust. Do not argue in front of facility staff unless necessary. Let them believe what they want to believe. That was the hardest part. Letting them believe I was weak. Amanda arrived at 9 sharp in her silver SUV. Grant pulled in behind her in a black sedan. Claire came in a rideshare, wearing oversized sunglasses, though the sky was cloudy. They entered my house without waiting to be invited. Amanda carried a checklist. Grant carried my suitcase. Claire carried guilt like perfume. Where are the rest of your things? Amanda asked, looking at the single bag near the stairs. You told me to pack small. I meant a little more than this. We don't want you uncomfortable. I looked at her carefully. Will I be uncomfortable? She looked away first. Grant cleared his throat. We can bring more later. Later. People say later when they do not want to say never. I walked through the house slowly before leaving. Amanda glanced at her watch twice, but I ignored her. I touched the banister Thomas had sanded by hand. I paused at the kitchen doorway where my children's heights were still marked in pencil on the trim. Amanda, age 6. Grant, age 4. Claire, age 2.5. Little lines climbing upward like proof that time had once moved kindly through this house. Claire noticed me looking and began to cry. Mom, please don't make this harder. I almost laughed. She thought my remembering was what made it hard. Not their betrayal. Not the suitcase. Not the luxury brochure waiting in Amanda's car like a polished sentence. My memories. I turned toward the living room. The morning light fell across Thomas's armchair. Across the rug, Amanda said, made the hallway look smaller. Across the piano Claire had begged for at 12 and abandoned by 15. I wondered if the house knew I was leaving. Old houses hold footsteps. They hold arguments, lullabies, prayers, slammed doors, birthday candles, grief. That house had held me for 40 years. My children had held me for less than 10 seconds at a time. Mom, Grant said gently, but there was impatience under it. We should go. I nodded. At the front door, I reached for my keys. Amanda put out her hand. I'll take those. I froze. For what? Just so we can coordinate contractors. There are no contractors scheduled. Grant stepped in. There will be. I can keep my keys. Amanda's smile tightened. Mom, please, don't turn every small thing into a battle. That was when I understood how they planned to erase me, not with one cruel act, but with 100 small, reasonable requests. A key here, a signature there, a temporary stay, a necessary repair, a safety concern, a daughter's tears. I held the keys for one more second. Then I placed only the spare set in Amanda's palm. She did not notice. Greed made her careless again. The ride to Magnolia Grove took 25 minutes. Amanda drove. Grant followed behind us. Claire sat in the back with me, holding a tissue she never used. No one played music. No one made conversation. We passed the live oaks, the shops, the old churches, the streets I had driven for decades delivering hospital beds and walkers to families who had no idea that one day I would be delivered somewhere too. Magnolia Grove residence appeared at the end of a curved driveway lined with crepe myrtles. It was beautiful in the way expensive places can be beautiful without feeling warm. White columns, clean windows, perfect flower beds, a fountain murmuring in the circular drive. Amanda exhaled with relief. See, it's lovely. I looked at the building and thought of a jewelry box, polished outside, locked inside. A young woman at reception greeted us with professional cheer. Welcome to Magnolia Grove. You must be Mrs. Sterling. I am, I said. Amanda stepped forward. I'm Amanda Whitman, her daughter. We spoke on the phone? Of course they had. Forms appeared. A tablet was placed on the counter. Amanda answered questions before I could. Dietary restrictions. She watches her salt. Mobility concerns. Stairs are difficult. They are not, I said. Amanda laughed softly. Mom, be honest. The receptionist smiled awkwardly. Grant stood beside my suitcase, checking messages. Claire wandered toward a vase of flowers and touched one petal as if she might collapse from the sadness of what she was helping do. Then a staff member named Denise came to escort us to my room. My room. Not suite, not apartment. Room. It was on the second floor, overlooking a garden courtyard. There was a bed with a pale blue cover, a dresser, a small desk, a television mounted on the wall, and a chair by the window. Everything was clean. Everything was pleasant. Everything belonged to no one. Amanda walked around approvingly. This is nice. Mom. Grant set my suitcase on the bed. Better than being alone in that big house. Claire finally took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red. I'll bring you your art books, she said. I don't have art books, I replied. She blinked, as if she had never noticed. Amanda opened the closet and hung my 3 blouses with quick, efficient movements. Grant took a call near the door. Yes, I should still make Miami by Friday, he said quietly. Miami. I looked at him. He turned away. Amanda's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and smiled despite herself. Something funny, I asked. Just a message from the luncheon committee. I have to stop by the club after this. Of course she did. Claire sat beside me on the bed. I might take a few days to myself, too, she said. This has been emotionally draining. For you? I asked. Her mouth opened, then closed. Denise returned with a welcome packet and explained mealtimes, activity schedules, visiting hours, medication procedures. I listened carefully. Amanda interrupted often. She may need reminders. She prefers quiet. She can get overwhelmed. Each sentence placed a thinner version of me into the room. Finally, I said, Amanda, I can speak for myself. The silence that followed was small, but sharp. Denise looked at me. Not Amanda. Of course. Mrs. Sterling. That tiny respect nearly made me cry. My children left less than 30 minutes later. Amanda kissed my cheek. We'll check in soon. Grant hugged me with one arm. Try to relax. Mom. Claire clung to me the longest. Please don't hate us, I wanted to say. Then stop doing hateful things. But I only touched her hair once, the way I had when she was little. Then they were gone. Through the window. I watched them cross the parking lot. Amanda walked fast, already on her phone. Grant opened his car door while talking into his. Claire stood for a moment near the curb, looking back up at the building. For one foolish second, I thought she might come back. She did not. She got into her rideshare and left. I sat in the chair by the window until their cars disappeared beyond the crepe myrtles. The room smelled like fresh paint, lemon cleaner, and strangers. Somewhere down the hall, a woman laughed at a television show. A cart rolled past my door. The fountain outside kept murmuring as if nothing important had happened. But something important had happened. My children had left me. Not because I could not care for myself, not because I had nowhere else to go, but because my home, my money, my company, and my signature had become easier to manage without me in the way. I let myself feel it then, not loudly, not dramatically, just one slow tear, then another. Then I opened my suitcase. I removed Thomas's photograph and placed it on the desk. I took out my Bible and set it beside the bed. I took out the envelope from Jonathan and held it in both hands. A soft knock came at the door. Denise stepped in. "Mrs. Sterling, is there anything you need?" I wiped my face. "Yes," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Could you help me make one phone call?" "Of course." To one of your children, I looked at Thomas's photograph. Then at the sealed envelope. "No," I said. To my attorney, for the first time since arriving at Magnolia Grove. The room did not feel like a cage. It felt like the first witness. While I was sitting in a pale blue room at Magnolia Grove, learning the sound of unfamiliar footsteps outside my door. My children were already living as if my life had been settled. That was what hurt in the beginning. Not only that they had left me there, but that they seemed relieved afterward. As if placing me in that room had cleared a troublesome item from their calendar. As if my absence created space for them to breathe, spend, travel, and continue pretending the Sterling name belonged more to them than to me. Amanda was the first to discover something had changed. She was having dinner at the Harbor Club, the same private club where she liked to be seen by women who wore pearls before noon and spoke about charity as if it were a competitive sport. I knew that place well. I had paid for more than one of her networking evenings there, though I had never been comfortable inside its quiet dining room, where even laughter seemed to have rules. Amanda had invited 2 women from a hospital foundation and 1 man connected to a senior care investment group. That much I learned later, from the messages Jonathan's office collected. She had ordered wine, oysters, sea bass, and a dessert tray for the table. She had spoken about family legacy and eldercare dignity. Words that must have tasted strange in her mouth only 3 days after she left her own mother in a facility and drove away to a luncheon. When the bill came, Amanda did what she had done for years. She slid out the black luxury card linked to the Sterling Family Trust. She did not hesitate. She did not check the amount. She did not wonder whether she had the right. She handed it over like a queen offering a ring. A few minutes later, The waiter returned with that careful expression service people use when they are about to embarrass someone powerful. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitman," he said quietly. The card was declined. Amanda smiled, because Amanda's first response to humiliation was always disbelief. "That's impossible. Please run it again." He did. The card declined again. She offered another one. Declined. Then a third. Declined. The women at the table pretended not to notice, which of course meant they noticed everything. Amanda's cheeks warmed beneath her makeup. She gave a light laugh, the kind meant to make other people feel silly for witnessing reality. "There must be a fraud hold," she said. "I've been dealing with the bank all week." But her hand trembled when she reached for her personal card. That one worked. Barely. Across the state. Grant discovered the truth in a louder way. He was in Miami. Not for business exactly, though he had called it business. Grant liked to attach business to pleasure the way Amanda attached charity to vanity. He had booked a suite at a waterfront resort, ordered a rental car upgrade, and reserved a private dinner with 2 potential investors he hoped would save a real estate deal that had been bleeding money for months. At check-in, he gave the front desk the sterling linked card. The clerk swiped it, then typed, then frowned. "Mr. Sterling, do you have another form of payment?" Grant gave the smile he used on contractors, lenders, and women he wanted to impress. "That card is fine. I'm afraid it's not authorizing." "Try it again." "I already did." "Sir?" He leaned closer. "Then call your manager." The manager came. The manager tried. The machine refused him with the cold obedience of a thing that cannot be charmed. Grant called the bank from the lobby, turning his back to the front desk as if privacy could protect him from embarrassment. I can imagine him standing there in his tailored jacket, one hand pressed to his ear, jaw tight, voice low and sharp. "This is Grant Sterling. There is a problem with my card." The bank representative asked verification questions. Grant answered impatiently. Then he was placed on hold. He hated being placed on hold. Men like Grant considered waiting an insult. When the representative returned, her voice had changed. "Mr. Sterling, the account associated with that card has been restricted. Restricted by whom I'm not able to discuss all details with you. I'm an authorized user. At this time, your authorization is suspended." Suspended. A word Grant had probably never imagined applying to him. He stepped outside the lobby, away from the polished marble and tropical flowers, and lowered his voice. "There must be a mistake." "No, sir. The restriction was placed under the protective provisions of the Sterling Family Trust." For the first time, he stopped arguing, because Grant knew enough about business to understand that trust language did not appear by accident. Claire's discovery happened in Atlanta, Tanina. Inside a designer boutique where the sales associates called her by name because my money had introduced her so many times. She had gone there to buy a handbag she said she needed for an upcoming gallery event. I later saw the attempted charge in the report, $4,800 before tax. Nearly $5,000 for a bag to carry insecurity around in. The associate wrapped it in tissue, placed it in a structured box, and waited for payment. Claire offered her card. Declined. She laughed nervously and tried another. Declined. Then she tried the card saved in her phone. Declined. People like Claire did not rage in public. They dissolved. Her eyes filled. Her voice shook. She told the associate there had to be some mistake. She stepped aside and called Amanda first. Amanda did not answer. Then Grant. He did not answer. Then she called the bank and learned the same thing in gentler words. Restricted, suspended, no longer authorized. By noon the next day, all three of them had called each other so many times that even I, sitting quietly in Magnolia Grove, could feel the panic moving toward me like weather. Amanda called first. I did not answer. Not because I was being cruel, though part of me wanted to be. I did not answer because Jonathan had told me not to speak with them until he was present. He knew, better than I did, how quickly my children could turn a conversation into a confession they could later twist. Grant called 5 minutes later, then Claire, then Amanda again. My phone buzzed on the small desk beside Thomas's photograph until Denise knocked on my door. Mrs. Sterling, are you all right? I looked at the screen. Missed call Amanda. Missed call Grant. Missed call Claire. For a moment, the mother in me reacted before the woman in me could stop her. 3 children calling at once still felt like danger. My heart jumped with the old instinct. Who is hurt? Who needs me? What do I have to fix? Then I remembered. They were not calling because they missed me. They were calling because the money did. I'm all right. I told Denise. Thank you. She hesitated. Do you want me to help you call them back? No. I said. Not yet. That evening, Jonathan came to Magnolia Grove in person. He wore his usual gray suit and carried a brown leather briefcase that looked older than some of my grandchildren would have been, had my children ever given me any. He greeted Denise politely, signed in at the front desk, and came to my room with the steady patience of a man who understood that justice often begins quietly. They've noticed, he said. I assumed so. He sat in the chair near the window. The bank confirmed the protective freeze went into effect at 9 a.m. yesterday. All cards linked to discretionary beneficiary access are suspended. No new withdrawals, no advances, no transfers without trustee review. I looked down at my hands. So it's done. The first part is done. The first part. Those words frightened and comforted me at the same time. What did they say to the bank, I asked? Jonathan's mouth tightened. Amanda claimed there had been fraud. Grant threatened legal action. Claire cried. I closed my eyes. There they were, my children, stripped down to their truest habits. Amanda controlled. Grant threatened. Claire wept. And what did the bank tell them that only the primary grantor could activate that clause? I opened my eyes. Me. You. Jonathan said. For years, I had thought of myself as a mother first, business owner second, widow always, woman somewhere far behind. But in the language of the trust, I was something my children had forgotten. Primary grantor, the person who built it, the person who funded it, the person who still had rights. Outside my window, the Magnolia Grove courtyard was turning gold in the late afternoon light. A woman in a wheelchair laughed as an aide adjusted a blanket over her knees. Somewhere down the hall, someone was playing old hymns on a piano slightly out of tune. My phone buzzed again. Amanda. Jonathan looked at it. Then at me. You do not have to answer. I watched the screen until the call ended. Then a message appeared. Mom, what did you do? Not are you okay? Not we're sorry. Not, can we come see you? What did you do? I felt something inside me settle into place. All my life, I had been afraid that setting boundaries would make me less loving, that saying no would make me hard, that protecting myself would mean I had failed as a mother. But sitting there in that room they had chosen for me, watching their panic arrive through a phone screen, I understood something with painful clarity. They had mistaken access for love, and I had mistaken sacrifice for proof. Jonathan reached into his briefcase and removed a folder. There is more. Rebecca, he said. I looked at him. The freeze will stop the immediate spending. But if we are going to prove financial abuse, coercion, and abandonment under the trust terms, we need a full audit. How far back? He paused. 7 years. The number landed between us heavily. 7 years of dinners, charges, transfers, reimbursements, emergency requests, gallery expenses, real estate losses, club fees, luxury purchases, and signatures I had given because I believed love should be generous. 7 years of my motherhood turned into statements. I looked at Thomas's photograph on the desk, then at my phone, where Amanda's message still glowed like an accusation. Mom, what did you do? I picked up the phone at last, but I did not call her. I typed one sentence. I protected myself. Then I handed the phone to Jonathan before I could soften it. He read the message, nodded once, and sent it. A minute later, Amanda replied. From what I stared at those 2 words until my eyes burned. Then I whispered the answer, though I did not send it. From you. Jonathan returned the next morning with 2 cups of coffee, a yellow legal pad, and the kind of expression that told me the easy part had already ended. I had slept badly my first night at Magnolia Grove. The mattress was comfortable enough. The room was clean, and Denise had checked on me twice before bedtime. But comfort is not the same as peace. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my children leaving the parking lot, Amanda walking fast, Grant turning away, Claire looking back once and still choosing to go. By morning, I had learned that abandonment does not always arrive with shouting. Sometimes it comes with a welcome packet, a private suite, and children who promise to check in soon. Jonathan set the coffee on the small desk beside Thomas's photograph. You look tired, he said. I am tired. Do you want to wait? No, I said. I have waited long enough. He nodded, opened his briefcase, and took out a thick folder labeled Sterling Family Trust. I stared at it for a moment. I remembered the day I signed those papers years earlier in Jonathan's office. Back then, the trust had seemed like something responsible people did when they had worked hard enough to have something worth organizing. I had thought of it as a gift to my children, a way to spare them confusion after I was gone. I had not imagined it would one day become a shield while I was still alive. Jonathan placed the folder between us. Rebecca, before we go further, I want you to understand something clearly. The freeze was not revenge, it was enforcement. I gave a faint smile. You sound like a lawyer. I am a lawyer. You know what I mean. His face softened. I do, and I need you to hear it anyway. What you did was lawful, documented, and consistent with the trust terms. Your children had discretionary access. They did not own those accounts. They did not own the company. They did not own the house. They had privileges, not rights. Privileges, not rights. Those words moved through me slowly, almost painfully. How many times had I treated their privileges like obligations? How many times had I believed that because I could help, I must help, that because I had built something, they were entitled to spend it? Jonathan opened the folder to a tabbed section. When we revised the trust 11 years ago, I recommended a founder protection clause. Do you remember why? I looked toward the window. In the courtyard below, a man in a straw hat was watering a row of flowers. His hand shook slightly, but he kept moving with careful patience. You said family money can bring out fear. I said family money can bring out fear, entitlement, and control. Jonathan corrected gently, especially when the person who created the wealth grows older. I didn't like hearing that. No parent does. I remembered sitting across from him then, offended on behalf of my own children. Amanda had just gotten involved with a charity board. Grant was working on his first real estate deal. Claire was trying to become an artist. They were flawed. Yes, but they were mine. I thought Jonathan's warning sounded cold. Now cold sounded like wisdom. He turned the folder toward me and tapped a section with his pen. The clause states that if there is credible evidence of financial exploitation, coercion related to medical or residential decisions, attempted improper control over assets, or abandonment of the grantor after forced relocation, beneficiary access can be suspended pending review. I read the words slowly. Financial exploitation, coercion, forced relocation, abandonment. Each phrase felt formal, almost sterile. But behind each one was a moment I had lived. Amanda sliding papers across my coffee table. Grant talking about trapped equity. Claire crying when I asked questions. My spare keys in Amanda's hand. My suitcase on a strange bed. My children leaving. What counts as credible evidence, I asked. Jonathan took out another folder. Thinner, but heavier in its own way. This does. Inside were copies of my journal entries. Dr. Patricia Lowell's medical evaluation. The limited forms I had signed. The unsigned power of attorney. Emails from Amanda asking Magnolia Grove about intake before I had agreed. And preliminary banking records showing irregular charges from the trust-linked cards. I touched the edge of the journal copies. You made copies of these, with your permission. I know. I swallowed. It just feels strange seeing my pain organized. Jonathan's eyes softened. That is often what evidence is, Rebecca. Pain organized well enough that other people cannot ignore it. I looked down at the documents again. There was the dinner. There was the doctor's appointment. There was the family meeting. There was the move. For weeks. I had felt as if I were losing my mind because my children kept telling me love looked like control. But here, on paper, the pattern was clear. They had not simply worried. They had planned. Jonathan continued. The bank acted because you are the primary grantor and because the trust language gives you the right to trigger a protective review. The co-trustee authority remains with you and the independent fiduciary office. Not Amanda, not Grant, not Claire. Do they know that they are beginning to understand it, despite everything? The thought of their fear did not make me happy. I imagined Amanda humiliated at the Harbor Club, Grant stranded in a Miami lobby, Claire crying in a boutique. Some small, wounded part of me wanted to rush in and fix it, pay the bill, smooth the embarrassment, tell them it was all right. But another part of me, the part that had driven delivery vans through rainstorms and built a company from a garage, finally stood up inside me and said, "No more." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we audit." He said it simply, but the word felt like a door opening into a dark room. "How much will they see?" "Everything they used," he said. "Every charge, every transfer, every reimbursement request, every trust distribution, every expense labeled as family care, business development, emergency support, investment assistance, or charitable representation." I closed my eyes. Amanda's luncheons, Grant's projects, Claire's studios. Years of saying yes. Years of telling myself generosity was love. And if the audit shows misuse, then we have options. Civil recovery, permanent suspension of discretionary access, referral for elder financial abuse investigation, depending on the findings. Also, any attempt to challenge your capacity becomes much harder because Dr. Lowell's report is clear. I opened my eyes. I don't want to destroy them. Jonathan did not answer quickly. That was one reason I trusted him. He never rushed the truth. "Rebecca, consequences are not destruction. Sometimes consequences are the only thing that interrupts destruction. Of them, of you." The room went quiet. Somewhere in the hallway, a nurse laughed softly with a resident. A meal cart rolled past. Life continued around me in ordinary sounds while the foundation of my family cracked open on a legal pad. Jonathan slid a final document toward me. "This authorizes the full 7-year forensic review. You do not have to sign it today." I looked at the signature line. For decades, my signature had given my children comfort. Tuition, rent, investments, rescue, access. My signature had opened doors for them. Now it would close one. My hand hovered over the page. I thought of Amanda saying, "It's just paperwork." "Mom." I thought of Grant saying, "Everything will be easier." I thought of Claire whispering, "Please don't hate us." Then I thought of myself, alone in this room, with my house behind me and my future being discussed as if I were already gone. I picked up the pen. This time, I read every line. Then I signed. Jonathan witnessed it, dated it, and placed it carefully in his folder. "There is one more thing," he said. I almost laughed. There always is. The house. My breath caught. "What about it?" "Your children may believe they can begin repairs. List it, borrow against it, or move items out. They cannot. I have filed notice with the county and with the Trust's Property Council. Any attempted transfer, lien, listing, or unauthorized access will trigger immediate legal response." I looked at Thomas's photograph. "So the house is safe. For now?" "Yes, for now." It was not everything, but it was enough for that moment. The house that had held my grief, my children's childhoods, my sleepless nights, my work. My prayers, it had not been stolen while I sat in Magnolia Grove. My children had moved me out, but they had not erased me from it. I pressed my fingers to my lips. Jonathan closed the folder. Rebecca, I need to ask you one hard question. I nodded. Do you want to remain here voluntarily while we proceed? Or do you want to leave Magnolia Grove? The question opened something inside me. I could leave. That truth felt almost too large to hold. My children had made this place feel like a sentence. Jonathan was reminding me it was only a location. I looked around the room, the pale blue bedspread, the small desk, the clean window, Thomas's photograph, my Bible, the suitcase still half full. Then I thought of Denise asking whether I needed anything, looking at me like a person instead of a problem. I'll stay for now, I said slowly. Not because they put me here, because I choose to stay while I decide what comes next. Jonathan smiled for the first time that morning. That is a very different thing. After he left, I sat alone with the quiet. My phone had stopped buzzing. Perhaps Amanda, Grant, and Claire were finally speaking to lawyers of their own. Perhaps they were blaming one another. Perhaps they were telling themselves I had been manipulated. Let them. For the first time in years, I did not feel the need to explain my pain to people committed to benefiting from it. I opened my journal and wrote, the clause they never read was not hidden. They simply never believed I would use it. Then I placed the pen down, looked out at the courtyard, and took a deep breath. My children thought the cards had stopped working. They had no idea the audit had just begun. They came back smiling. That was the part I had not expected. I had imagined anger first. Amanda's sharp voice, Grant's threats, Claire's tears. I had expected accusations, panic, maybe even silence. But 3 days after the cards stopped working and the audit began, all 3 of my children appeared at Magnolia Grove with flowers, pastries, and the kind of bright expressions people wear when they are trying to repair a broken window by hanging curtains over it. Denise knocked on my door that morning. Mrs. Sterling, she said carefully. Your children are here. I was sitting by the window with my Bible open on my lap, though I had not read a full sentence in 20 minutes. My eyes kept moving across the same line without absorbing it. Since Jonathan had left, my phone had been quiet. And somehow that quiet had been worse than the calls. Quiet gave imagination too much room. All 3, I asked. Yes, ma'am. I looked at Thomas's photograph on the desk. Well, I said, closing the Bible. I suppose the frozen cards finally taught them where I live? Denise tried not to smile. They asked if they could come up. Please tell them I'll meet them in the small conference room near reception. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Not here. No, not in my room. That room was the only private space I had in Magnolia Grove. My children had already entered my home, my accounts, my decisions, and my dignity with too much entitlement. I would not let them walk into this little room and turn it into another stage. And Denise? Yes, please ask Mr. Jonathan Pierce to be called. His number is at the front desk. Tell my children I will speak with them when he arrives. Denise's expression shifted from polite concern to understanding. I'll take care of it. 40 minutes later, I walked into the conference room wearing a lavender blouse, pearl earrings, and the calmest face I could manage. My knees hurt a little, but I refused to let my walk show it. Pain is one thing. Weakness is another. And that day, I had no intention of giving my children either. Amanda stood first. "Mommy," she said. "Mommy." I had not heard that word from her in years. She came toward me with open arms, smiling as if we had simply had a little misunderstanding over holiday plans. Her perfume reached me before her hands did. Expensive and floral and false. I stepped back. Her arms paused in the air before she lowered them. "Rebecca," Jonathan said from behind me, his voice steady. "Why don't you sit here?" He pulled out the chair at the head of the table. Amanda's eyes flicked toward him, irritation passing over her face before she covered it with concern. "Of course," she said. "We're glad you're here too. Jonathan, maybe you can help clear up this terrible confusion?" Grant sat with his jaw tight. His fingers locked together on the table. He had not shaved. That small detail told me more than his expression did. Grant always shaved before battle. If he had not, he was either frightened or unraveling. Claire sat beside him, holding a white bakery box in her lap as if it were an apology. "I brought those lemon tarts you like," she said softly. "You brought the ones you like," I replied. "I prefer peach." Her face crumpled for half a second. "Good," I thought, then hated myself for thinking it. Amanda placed a bouquet on the table. White roses. The kind people send to hospitals, funerals, and women they have wounded but not yet apologized to. "Mom," she began. "We came because things have gotten completely out of hand." I looked at her. "Have they?" "Yes," she said quickly. "The bank has made some absurd mistake. Cards frozen, accounts restricted, calls being routed through legal review. It's humiliating. Humiliating. Not heartbreaking. Not alarming. Humiliating." Jonathan opened his folder but did not speak. Amanda continued. "We understand you were upset about Magnolia Grove. Maybe we moved too quickly. Maybe we should have included you in more of the details." "More of the details?" I repeated. Grant leaned forward. "Mom, nobody abandoned you." The word landed hard on the table. I had not said it. He had. Claire began to cry immediately. "We would never abandon you," she whispered. "You know that." I looked at my youngest child and remembered her at 5 years old, climbing into my lap after a nightmare. I remembered the weight of her small body, the smell of baby shampoo in her hair, the way she trusted me to make monsters disappear. Now she was asking me to make the monster of her own choices disappear. "You left me here," I said. Amanda's smile stiffened. "For your safety. You took my spare keys. To coordinate repairs. There were no repairs scheduled." Grant looked away. "You brought a power of attorney document to my living room." Amanda exhaled sharply. "A standard precaution. You called Magnolia Grove before I agreed." Claire wiped her eyes. "You discussed my trust before you discussed my loneliness." I said. That silenced them. For the first time since they entered, None of them knew what face to wear. Jonathan finally spoke. This conversation is being documented. For everyone's protection, I have Rebecca's consent to record this meeting, and Magnolia Grove's administrator has agreed to serve as a witness if needed. Amanda's head snapped toward him. Record, she said. Yes, we're her children, and that does not exempt this conversation from documentation, Jonathan replied. Grant's voice dropped. Is that really necessary? I looked at him. If everything you did was loving, why are you afraid of it being recorded? His mouth closed. Amanda leaned back, anger finally showing through the polish. Mom, I don't recognize you like this. There it was. The oldest punishment children use on aging parents who finally resist. You are not yourself. But I was myself. More myself than I had been in years. No. Amanda, I said quietly, you don't recognize me without access. Her face changed as if I had slapped her. Claire sobbed once into a tissue. Grant stared at the table. Amanda gathered herself quickly. We are not here for money. Jonathan slid a printed page across the table. No drama. No accusation. Just paper. Amanda looked down. So did Grant. Claire leaned over and covered her mouth. The page listed recent charges from the trust-linked cards Harbor Club dinner, Miami resort deposit, Atlanta boutique attempt, spa services, private club dues, gallery framing, rental car upgrade. Amanda's cheeks flushed. These are taken out of context. Jonathan placed another page down, then another, then another. Not the full audit. Not yet. Just enough to let them see the shape of what was coming. Grant whispered, Where did you get these? Jonathan looked at him. From accounts you were never entitled to treat as personal income. Amanda turned to me. Mom, we used those cards with your permission for years. I gave help. I said, you turned it into ownership. We represented the family, she snapped. No, I said, you spent the family. Claire broke then. I'm sorry, she whispered. Amanda shot her a look so sharp it nearly cut across the table. Claire, but Claire shook her head. Tears ran down her face. Real this time. Not pretty or controlled. I didn't think it would go this far, Grant muttered. None of us did. Amanda turned on both of them. Stop talking like we committed a crime. Jonathan's voice remained calm. That is one of the matters being reviewed. The room went still again. Amanda looked at me, and for one brief moment, I saw not the polished woman, not the charity board daughter, not the strategist. I saw the frightened 9-year-old who had once asked me if we would lose our house after her father died. But this time, fear did not make her small. It made her cruel. You would really do this to your own children, she asked. I felt the question move through the room, heavy with accusation. My own children, the same words I had used for decades to excuse everything. I folded my hands on the table. No, I said, I would do this for myself. Grant lifted his head. Claire stared at me. Amanda's lips parted slightly. I continued. For 40 years, I protected this family from hunger, grief, shame, debt, and disappointment. I protected all of you until protection became permission. But I am still alive. I am still competent. I am still the woman who built Sterling Home Care Solutions, paid for your lives, and signed every check you now pretend belonged to you. My voice shook then, but I did not stop. You do not get to put me in a room, take my keys, reach for my trust, spend my money, and call it love. Claire covered her face. Grant looked like he might be sick. Amanda sat frozen. Jonathan placed one final document on the table. It was not a charge list. It was Dr. Lowell's capacity report. Rebecca Sterling is fully capable of managing her legal, medical, and financial affairs, Jonathan said. Amanda stared at it. All her plans had depended on one story that I was confused. Fragile, persuadable, and in need of management. That story had just been taken from her. I stood slowly. This meeting is over. Mom, Grant said. I looked at him. He had tears in his eyes. But I no longer knew whether they were for me or for himself. If any of you want to speak to me again, I said, you will do it with Jonathan present until I decide otherwise. Amanda stood too. You're making a mistake. I gave her the saddest smile of my life. No, sweetheart. I made the mistake years ago when I taught you that my love had no limits. Then I walked out before any of them could answer. In the hallway, Denise was waiting near the reception desk. She did not ask what happened. She only gave me a small nod. The kind one woman gives another when she has survived a room full of people who wanted her smaller. Behind me, the conference room stayed silent. For once, my children had come to take control and left with nothing but evidence. The audit began on a rainy Monday. Charleston rain is different from the storms people imagine. It does not always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it settles over the city quietly, turning the streets silver and the old oak trees dark against the sky. That morning, I sat in the small library at Magnolia Grove, watching raindrops slide down the windows while Jonathan Pierce opened a laptop across from me. There were only 3 other residents in the room. One woman slept in an armchair. A man worked on a crossword puzzle. Another woman knitted something blue and never looked up. Life continued around me, while my own life was about to be measured in numbers. Jonathan folded his glasses and looked at me carefully. Rebecca, I need to ask again. Are you sure you want to see everything I have to? Some of it may hurt. I gave a small smile. They already hurt me. The numbers are simply catching up. He nodded and opened the first file. 7 years. 7 years of transactions, statements, reimbursements, transfers, supplementary cards, expense reports, withdrawals, and requests. At first, the pages looked harmless. Restaurant charges, hotel deposits, business dinners, travel expenses, family support, emergency assistance. Words can make almost anything sound respectable. Then Jonathan began separating them. This account paid for Amanda's Harbor Club dues. I looked down. $3,000. Annual renewal. Every year. She told me those memberships were necessary for networking. Jonathan turned another page. Designer boutiques, spa packages, luxury hotel weekends. private fundraising dinners. One charge caught my attention. A personal stylist. $5,800. I stared at the number. I remember this, I said quietly. Jonathan looked up. She told me she needed help preparing for a hospital foundation gala. She said appearance mattered. And what did you tell her? I looked out at the rain. I told her to buy whatever she needed. For years, I had confused generosity with encouragement. Amanda always knew how to frame her desires as investments. Not in herself, in the family, in the company, in the sterling name. But the receipts told a different story. Jonathan slid another stack toward me. Grant. The word itself felt heavier. Because while Amanda spent beautifully, Grant spent desperately. Failed investment transfers. Private loans. Credit extensions. Interest payments. Luxury rental properties. Emergency wire requests. I felt my stomach tighten. He lost this much. Jonathan nodded. Possibly more. But he always said the projects were doing well. He appears to have been moving money between investments to cover losses. How long? Several years. I closed my eyes. Suddenly, I understood why Grant had spoken so often about trapped equity. Real estate opportunities. Unlocking assets. Restructuring wealth. He had not been talking about my future. He had been trying to survive his own. One page stopped me completely. A loan application. The collateral description included my address. My house. Thomas's house. Our house. I looked up slowly. He used my property. He appears to have explored using it as financial support, Jonathan said carefully. The loan was never finalized because he couldn't access it. Yes, my hands began to shake. The old kitchen. The growth marks on the hallway wall. Thomas's workshop. Claire's piano. Amanda's graduation photographs. Grant had nearly offered all of it to a bank. Not because he hated me, because he believed it was already his. The realization hurt more than anger. Then came Claire. The pages grew softer somehow. Art supplies, studio rent, gallery expenses, travel, hotels, designer handbags, airfare, restaurants, interior design services. One purchase made me pause. $1,200, hand-painted Italian shoes. I almost laughed. Claire once cried because we could not afford ballet lessons. I worked extra shifts delivering hospital equipment so she could join the school art club. Now she owned shoes worth more than our monthly grocery budget when she was a child. Jonathan watched me quietly. She spent less than the others. He said, "That doesn't make it easier." No, because numbers alone do not measure betrayal. Intent does. Amanda spent because she believed she deserved. Grant spent because he believed he needed. Claire spent because she believed someone else would always rescue her. And that someone had always been me. By noon, the rain had become heavier. The library had emptied. Jonathan closed one folder and opened another. This section concerns expenses labeled as family care. I frowned. Family care? Yes. Many of the charges had descriptions attached. Support for Rebecca. Home maintenance. Health expenses. Transportation. Senior assistance. I stared. These aren't mine. No. One charge had paid for Amanda's spa retreat. Another covered Grant's resort stay. Several belonged to Claire's gallery trips. The descriptions had simply been altered. Who approved these? Jonathan was quiet. The authorized users submitted them. The authorized users. My children. The room suddenly felt cold. For years, I had defended them whenever friends suggested boundaries. Marjorie once told me, "Rebecca, your children spend like heirs." I answered, "They're grateful." Another friend said, "Amanda acts like the company belongs to her." I replied, "She's proud of it." My accountant once asked, "Do you monitor these expenses carefully?" I smiled and said, "They're family." Family. What a dangerous word that can become when nobody defines it. The next document hurt the most. It was an email. Amanda to a real estate consultant. The date was 8 months earlier. Subject line, future property options. The message was short. When my mother eventually transitions out of the family home. What is the estimated market value if sold without renovation? Eventually. The consultant had replied with estimates. Amanda had continued the conversation. Potential timelines. Tax consequences. Selling strategies. I could not breathe for a moment. Jonathan reached across the table. Rebecca. She was planning. Yes, she was already planning. I heard my own voice breaking. Not because of the house. Not because of the money. Because somewhere inside that email was the assumption that I had already become a problem to solve. I remembered Amanda at 10 years old after Thomas died. She had slept beside me for months because she was afraid I would disappear too. Now she was discussing the sale of my home before I had even left it. Jonathan handed me a tissue. I laughed through tears. I hate crying in front of lawyers. I've seen worse. Have you? Yes. Families. That answer stayed with me. Families. The people we believe will protect us. The people who often know exactly where to hurt us. By late afternoon, we had reviewed only part of the records. The entire audit would take weeks. But the picture had already emerged. Amanda had built status. Grant had built debt. Claire had built dependence. And I had financed all three. Jonathan finally closed the last folder. There is enough here to pursue legal action. I looked at him. What kind? Civil recovery? Financial abuse claims? Trust enforcement? Potential referrals? The words sounded enormous. I don't want to send my children to court. You may not have to. What if they apologize? He considered that. Apologies and accountability are not the same thing. Outside. The rain had finally stopped. A thin band of sunlight appeared beyond the clouds. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then Jonathan said something unexpected. Grant requested a meeting. I looked up. Grant. Yes. Alone. When he contacted my office this morning, I felt confused. Grant had always been the most guarded of my children. Amanda controlled the room. Claire filled it with emotion. But Grant hid behind silence and business language. What did he say? Jonathan opened his notebook. He said, and I quote, "I need to talk to my mother before Amanda destroys everything." Amanda, not us, not the family. Amanda, do you believe him? I asked. Jonathan leaned back. I believe people become honest when they run out of places to hide. I looked down at the reports one final time. Thousands of dollars, hundreds of transactions, years of excuses. Yet somehow, the thing that hurt most was not any number. It was the realization that my children had slowly stopped seeing me as their mother. I had become funding, protection, emergency support, a signature, a solution, and perhaps Grant, for reasons I did not yet understand, was finally ready to admit it. As Jonathan packed his files, he paused. You do not have to decide anything today. But I already knew one thing. I would listen to Grant, not because I trusted him, not because I had forgiven him, but because somewhere beneath the debt, the fear, and the lies, he was still the little boy who used to climb into Thomas's lap and ask whether the family would always stay together. Perhaps he finally understood that he had helped tear it apart. That evening, alone in my room, I opened my journal. I wrote one sentence. Money did not change my children. It revealed what they had become when they no longer needed to hide. Then, after a long pause, I added another. Tomorrow, my son wants to tell me the truth. Grant arrived alone. That surprised me more than anything. For years, my son and Amanda had moved like business partners. She spoke. He reinforced. She planned. He executed. Even Claire, with all her softness and tears, often drifted toward Amanda's side whenever conflict appeared. Amanda created certainty, and people who feared consequences often followed certainty. But on Thursday afternoon, Grant walked into Magnolia Grove without his sisters, without his expensive watch, without his tailored jacket, without the confidence he had worn for most of his adult life. Denise brought him to the courtyard because I had refused another conference room. The weather had finally turned warm again. The fountain flowed softly nearby, and several residents sat beneath the shade of old trees. Grant looked older. Not physically, not really, but there was a heaviness around him that had not existed before. He sat across from me without speaking. For several moments, neither of us said anything. I watched his hands. When he was little, he used to twist his fingers together whenever he lied. Thomas once told me, watch his hands. They always tell the truth before his mouth does. His fingers were twisting now. Jonathan isn't here, he finally asked. He knows you're coming. Grant nodded. I wanted to speak to you alone. Why? He looked toward the fountain. Because I don't know how much time I have before Amanda finds out I came. I studied him carefully. When did you become afraid of your sister? He laughed softly. I don't think I was afraid of her at first. What changed? She started making sense. The answer settled between us. Grant leaned back in the chair. After Dad died, Amanda became the strong one. I frowned slightly. No, I became the strong one. He nodded. You did. But Amanda became the person who told us everything would be okay. She made plans. She organized things. She talked about the future. I remembered Amanda helping Claire with homework. Amanda reminding Grant about school assignments. Amanda comforting both of them after Thomas's funeral. She had been only 14. Perhaps I had asked too much of her. Perhaps she had learned too early that control could feel like love. Grant continued. When I started losing money, Amanda kept telling me not to panic. How much money? He swallowed. More than you know. I've seen the reports. No, he said quietly. You've seen part of them. The words made my stomach tighten. How bad is it? He stared at his hands. About $2 million. I felt the air leave my lungs. 2 million. Not poor decisions. Not temporary setbacks. $2 million. Went over 5 years. How? He laughed bitterly. Pride. The answer sounded honest. He explained slowly. Bad investments, construction delays, loans, interest, investors demanding returns, projects collapsing, money borrowed to save money already lost. I kept thinking the next deal would fix everything. And Amanda knew. He nodded. She helped me. Helped you. She found money. The fountain continued behind us. Birds moved through the trees. Somewhere nearby, one of the residents laughed. Normal life surrounded words that no mother wants to hear. What kind of money? Grant finally looked at me. Trust distributions. I approved many of those. Yes, but not all. His silence answered. My chest became tight. Grant. He closed his eyes. Amanda said it was temporary. Temporary. The favorite word of people asking for things that never return. She said the trust belonged to us eventually anyway. She said you always wanted to help. She said we were protecting the family. The family from what? From losing everything. I almost laughed. The irony hurt. They had been willing to lose me in order to save themselves. Did Claire know? Not at first. And later, she knew some things. Did she know about the house? Grant became very still. That silence frightened me more than the answer. Grant. Yes. My voice barely worked. You discussed my house. He nodded. With Amanda? Yes. How long? He looked down. Almost a year. A year. While we had dinners. While we celebrated birthdays. While Amanda brought flowers. While Claire hugged me. They had been discussing my home. Did you intend to sell it? He answered immediately. No. I almost felt relief. Then he continued. Just refinance it. Just such a small word. Just use the house. Just move Mom temporarily. Just sign here. Just trust us. Without asking me, Amanda thought you would agree eventually. And if I didn't? He looked away. I don't know. I knew. That was the terrible part. I knew. The doctor. The paperwork. The residents. The pressure. The concern. The urgency. All of it suddenly lined up like dominoes. My children had not started with Magnolia Grove. They had started with my house. Did Amanda plan this? He hesitated. Yes. The word fell quietly. Yet it changed everything. For weeks, I had wondered whether Amanda simply moved too quickly. Whether she genuinely believed she was helping. Whether fear had made her controlling. Grant removed those possibilities. She said if you moved voluntarily, things would be easier. There's that word again. He nodded. She believed if you stayed at Magnolia Grove for a while, eventually you would agree to everything. Power of attorney. Yes. The trust. Yes. The house. He lowered his head. Yes. I felt tears building, but they were different now. Not confusion. Not grief. Truth often hurts differently than uncertainty. Grant spoke again. I didn't want you there, yet you drove me. I know. Why? His eyes finally met mine. Because I was drowning. There it was. Not greed, not hatred. Fear. My son had become so frightened of losing his life that he helped take mine apart. That realization did not excuse him, but it explained him. I thought if Amanda fixed everything, we could all survive. And now, he laughed softly. Now I realize Amanda was never fixing anything. What was she doing? He looked toward the fountain. Winning. That word described Amanda more accurately than any diagnosis ever could. Winning. Control. Order. Outcomes. She had spent years organizing the world around her until people became projects. Even me. Why are you telling me this? Grant's eyes filled. Because despite everything, he was still my son. Because when the card stopped working, Amanda became someone I didn't recognize. What do you mean, she blamed you? I looked at him. She said you were being manipulated. She said Jonathan poisoned you against us. She said if you wouldn't cooperate, then legal action might force the issue. Legal action. Against me. My own daughter. Force what competency review? I became cold. Doctor. Lowell. The appointment. The questions. The documentation. Suddenly, I understood. Amanda had not simply wanted reassurance. She had wanted evidence, and when the evidence failed her, she had considered finding another path. Did Claire know? I don't think so. And you? He looked ashamed. I didn't stop it. No, he had not. But today, he had walked into Magnolia Grove alone. Sometimes courage arrives very late. Sometimes it arrives after damage has already been done. But it still matters. I sat quietly for several moments. Grant finally spoke. Are you going to destroy us? The question sounded almost childlike. Destroy us? As if consequences and destruction were the same thing. I don't know. He nodded. That's fair. I don't want to hurt you. I know. But I can't save you anymore. His face broke then. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just a man reaching the end of a story he had been telling himself. I miss Dad. He whispered. The words surprised me. So did my own tears. I do too. He would hate me. I thought about Thomas. Steady Thomas. Honest Thomas. The man who repaired broken chairs instead of throwing them away. No, I said softly. He would be disappointed. Grant cried. A 50-year-old man sitting beside a fountain in a retirement community. A man who had nearly lost his mother while trying to save himself. I let him cry. For years, I had rushed to rescue my children from pain. Perhaps pain was finally teaching him something I could not. After several minutes, He wiped his eyes. There's one more thing. My heart sank. There always is. He managed a weak smile. Amanda has been meeting with another attorney. For what I don't know everything. What do you know? She thinks she can challenge parts of the trust? I became very still. Based on what Grant looked directly at me. Your age. The fountain continued flowing. The residents continued talking. The sky remained blue, and somewhere beyond Magnolia Grove, my daughter was preparing for another battle. Not against Jonathan. Not against paperwork. Against me. Grant stood slowly. I'm sorry. Mom. The words finally sounded real. Not polished. Not strategic. Not useful. Just painful. I looked at my son, the boy who once held my hand crossing streets, the man who nearly helped take my home. I believe you're sorry. His eyes filled again. But that doesn't make everything right. No. He nodded. No, it doesn't. As he walked toward the parking lot, he stopped once and turned back. She won't stop, he said. Who? Amanda. Then he left. I sat alone beside the fountain for a long time. The truth had finally begun arriving. But truth has a strange quality. It heals. And it wounds. That afternoon, I called Jonathan. We need to meet. His voice became serious immediately. What happened? I looked toward the empty gate where my son had disappeared. Grant finally told me why my daughter wanted me gone. Amanda filed the petition on a Monday. Jonathan called me at 8:17 that morning. I remember the exact time because I had just finished breakfast in Magnolia Grove's dining room. Denise had convinced me to join the other residents instead of eating alone in my room. I was beginning to know their names. Eleanor liked crossword puzzles. Frank had been a history teacher. Ruth always carried peppermint candies in her purse and offered them to everyone as if sugar could repair the world. For the first time since arriving, I had laughed at breakfast. Then my phone rang. Rebecca, Jonathan said. I need you to stay calm. No lawyer says those words before good news. I set my coffee down. What happened? Amanda filed a petition for competency review. The room seemed to go quiet around me. She did what she's requesting, an independent evaluation and temporary oversight review of your financial decision-making. I stared through the dining room windows. Outside, 2 residents were walking slowly around the garden. She's suing me. Not exactly, but she's trying to prove I'm incapable. Yes, the honesty hurt less than kindness would have. I closed my eyes. My own daughter. The little girl who used to sleep beside me after thunderstorms. The teenager who held my hand at Thomas's funeral. The woman who had once introduced me at a charity dinner as the strongest person she knew. Now she wanted a court to question my mind. Why I whispered. Jonathan was quiet. Because if she can create doubt, she can challenge the trust protections. I sat very still. So Grant was right. Yes. A nurse passed by my table and smiled. I smiled back automatically. People do not realize how strange grief can be. Sometimes your world breaks while someone is asking whether you want more coffee. When do I need to respond? We already are. We, Rebecca. This is exactly why we documented everything. I exhaled slowly. The doctor's report. The journal. The meeting, the recordings, the audit. Suddenly, I understood why Jonathan had insisted on every detail. Amanda had not been preparing for a family conversation. She had been preparing for a case. That afternoon, Jonathan came to Magnolia Grove. This time, we met in the administrator's office. The administrator, Linda Matthews, sat beside us. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes who had watched my children visit, watched them leave, and watched me slowly begin to breathe again. Jonathan placed the petition on the desk. Amanda Whitman, petitioner. Rebecca Sterling, subject. I stared at the word. Not mother, not founder, not widow, not Rebecca. Subject. Amanda claimed several concerns: advanced age, questionable financial decisions, isolation, outside influence, possible diminished judgment. I read each phrase twice. Outside influence. That was Jonathan. Isolation. That was Magnolia Grove. Questionable financial decisions. That was me freezing access to money that belonged to me. She actually wrote these things. Jonathan nodded. Linda looked genuinely upset. She seems very concerned, she said carefully. I almost laughed. Concern. That beautiful word people use when control sounds ugly. Jonathan opened another folder. We respond with facts. He laid the evidence across the desk. Doctor. Lowell's evaluation. My signed statements. Financial records. The trust provisions. The documented pressure. The attempted power of attorney. Amanda had brought assumptions. Jonathan had brought paper. Will she win? I asked. No. The answer came immediately. Are you sure as lawyers are ever allowed to be? But she can still do this. Yes. That was the hardest truth. Children can hurt their parents legally. Not because they are right. Because they can. After Jonathan left, I returned to my room feeling older than I had in years. Thomas's photograph sat beside the window. I picked it up. You would know what to do, I whispered. Of course he would not. Thomas had been many things, but he had never imagined our children becoming this. None of us had. Around 4 o'clock, Denise knocked. Mrs. Sterling. Yes, there's a visitor. I assumed it was Claire. It was Amanda. Alone. She stood in the hallway wearing a cream-colored coat and carrying no flowers. No pastries. No gifts. Just herself. I only need a few minutes. I almost refused. But something inside me wanted to see her. The real Amanda. Not the polished daughter. Not the charity board member. Not the strategist. Just my child. She sat in the chair beside the window. Neither of us spoke at first. Finally, I said, "You filed papers against me." She folded her hands. I filed protections. No. Her eyes met mine. No. I repeated. You filed papers against me. Amanda looked tired. For the first time in years, she looked older than her age. You don't understand what's happening. Then explain it. She stood and walked toward the window. The company, the trust, the house, everything is falling apart. No, your access is falling apart. She turned sharply. You think this is about money? What is it about? Her voice broke unexpectedly. I held this family together. The words surprised me. What? After Dad died. She was crying now. Not neatly. Not strategically. Actually crying. You worked all the time. You had to. I know that. But somebody had to make sure Grant did his homework. Somebody had to help Claire sleep. Somebody had to act like things were normal. I listened. I was 14. Her voice shook. I was 14 years old, and everyone kept telling me to be strong because Mom needed help. Memories came rushing back. Amanda packing lunches. Amanda helping Claire dress. Amanda reminding Grant about school projects. I had thought she was responsible. Maybe she had been frightened. I spent my whole life fixing things. She whispered. I said nothing. When Grant started losing money, I fixed it. You used mine. Yes. When Claire needed help, I fixed it. You used mine. Yes. When you decided I should leave my home. Her tears fell harder. I was fixing that too. I looked at my daughter. Suddenly, I could see both versions at once. The frightened 14-year-old. The controlling 50-year-old. The child who carried too much. The woman who believed carrying everything gave her ownership. You never asked me, I said softly. I knew what was best. No. She lowered her head. No, I repeated. You knew what felt safest for you. She sat down again. I was afraid. Of what? Losing everything. There it was. Not losing me. Everything. The house, the trust, the company, the structure, the future. Amanda looked up. When the cards stopped working, I realized how much depended on you. I smiled sadly. You should have realized that when I was working 60 hours a week. She began crying again. For the first time, I did not rush to comfort her. Not because I lacked compassion, because she needed to sit inside her own truth. After several minutes, she spoke quietly. I withdrew the petition. I blinked. What? This afternoon. I stared at her. I called my attorney. Why? She wiped her face. Because Grant told me he met with you. Of course. He told me what he said. And he said you looked at him the same way Dad used to. I felt my throat tighten. What way? Disappointed. She laughed softly through tears. I can survive people hating me. I don't think I can survive disappointing Dad. For several moments, neither of us moved. Then I asked the question that had lived inside me for weeks. Did you love me? Amanda looked shocked. Mom. No. Answer me. She cried openly now. I love you more than anyone. Then why did you do this? The answer came quietly. Because I stopped seeing you as a person. The honesty took my breath away. I saw responsibilities. problems, decisions, risks. I forgot you were still my mother. There it was. The thing I had been mourning all along. Not the money, not the house, not even Magnolia Grove. The loss of being seen. Amanda stood. I don't expect forgiveness. I nodded. Good. She almost smiled. You always become terrifying when you're honest. I learned from your father. At the door. She stopped. I withdrew the petition. I believed her, not because she cried, not because she apologized, because for the first time in years, Amanda had surrendered control. After she left, I sat beside the window until sunset. The courtyard turned gold. Residents walked slowly toward dinner. Thomas's photograph rested beside my hand. For weeks, I had been fighting my children. Today, for the first time, one of them had stopped fighting me. Perhaps that was not forgiveness. Perhaps it was only exhaustion. But somewhere inside me, a very small piece of hope returned. Not hope that things would go back. They never could. But hope that truth, once spoken aloud, might finally begin doing what control never could. It might begin healing. 3 days after Amanda withdrew the petition, I went home, not permanently, not yet, but for the first time since my children had driven me to Magnolia Grove, I walked through my own front door. Jonathan arranged it. Linda encouraged it. Denise practically insisted, "You need to see your house before you decide what comes next." She told me. For weeks, I had thought of the house as something distant, almost mythical, as if it belonged to another woman, the woman who still slept in her own bed, the woman whose children had not yet packed her suitcase, the woman who believed sacrifice automatically produced gratitude. Jonathan drove me himself. As we turned onto my street, I felt my chest tighten. The oak trees looked exactly the same. The neighbors' mailboxes stood exactly where they had always stood. The yellow house at the corner still had the broken fence Mr. Callahan never repaired. Life had continued. Only I had disappeared. Jonathan parked in the driveway. Neither of us spoke. Finally, he handed me the keys. My real keys. The set Amanda never received. I stared at them in my hand. Small pieces of metal. Proof of ownership. Proof of belonging. Proof that I had not yet been erased. "You don't have to go in immediately," Jonathan said. But I already opened the car door. The front porch looked smaller than I remembered. Or perhaps I had simply become older. I climbed the steps slowly. My hand touched the railing Thomas had sanded decades earlier. The paint near the doorframe had chipped slightly. A few leaves had collected beside the flower pots. Ordinary things. Beautiful things. The key turned. The door opened. And my house breathed. That is the only way I can describe it. Old houses breathe. They hold silence differently than buildings meant only for living. My house held memory. It held Thomas laughing in the kitchen. It held children running down hallways. It held grief after funerals, Christmas mornings, arguments, birthdays, and now it held absence. The air smelled faintly of dust. The clocks had stopped. Sunlight stretched across the living room floor. Thomas's chair sat exactly where I had left it. For several seconds, I could not move. Then I cried. Not because anything had been damaged, because nothing had. The house had waited. Jonathan remained near the doorway. "I'll give you time." I nodded. I walked into the kitchen first. The coffee mugs still hung beside the cabinet. The recipe box remained near the stove. My reading glasses sat on the counter where I had forgotten them weeks earlier. Weeks. It felt like years. Oh, upstairs. My bedroom remained untouched. The quilt, the dresser, Thomas's watch, the anniversary earrings. Everything exactly where it belonged. Unlike me, I sat on the edge of my bed and allowed myself to feel the weight of it. My children had removed me from this house not because it was unsafe, not because I could not live here, because my absence made their plans easier. That truth no longer confused me, but it still hurt. After nearly an hour, Jonathan joined me in the kitchen. "There is something else you should see." He handed me several photographs. My stomach tightened. "What are these?" "The security company sent them." I frowned. "I don't have cameras." "You do now." I looked at him. When the trust protections were activated, I recommended temporary monitoring. The first photograph showed Amanda standing at my front door. The date was 6 days earlier. The second showed Grant beside her. The third showed both of them speaking with a locksmith. I felt cold. "They came here." Jonathan nodded. "The locksmith refused service." "Why?" "He asked whether they owned the property. And they said they were handling family matters." I looked down at the photographs. Amanda, Grant, standing outside my house, trying to enter. When? The day after Amanda filed the petition, the room suddenly seemed smaller. My children had attempted to gain access while simultaneously questioning my competency. The timing could not be ignored. What did they want? We don't know. But I did. Documents, financial records, perhaps jewelry, perhaps simply control. The terrible thing about betrayal is that once you finally see it clearly, you begin understanding events you previously explained away. Grant wanting the keys, Amanda discussing repairs, the urgency, the pressure, the timelines. I sat very quietly. Jonathan spoke gently. "This is why we documented everything." I nodded. For the first time, anger appeared. Real anger. Not sadness. Not disappointment. Anger. Because my children had not simply made mistakes. They had made choices. And choices have weight. While we sat in the kitchen, my phone rang. Claire. I stared at the screen. Jonathan said nothing. I answered. "Hello?" Her voice sounded frightened. "Mom, where are you? Why?" "Amanda told me she can't find you." "I'm safe." "I know, but no. Claire, do you—" Silence. Then she began crying. Not loudly, just softly. "I don't know what's happening anymore." I looked around my kitchen, the refrigerator covered with old magnets, the curtains I had sewn myself, the table where my children once colored with crayons. Neither did I. What do you need? Claire. I need my mother. The words hurt, because she had needed me all along, just not enough to stop what happened. I'm here. I mean, really here. I closed my eyes. For years, Claire had lived inside emotions she did not understand. Amanda organized life. Grant chased success. Claire escaped. Perhaps that was her tragedy. She never learned how to stand inside difficult truths. Come to the house, I said. Jonathan looked at me. I nodded slightly. An hour later, Claire arrived alone. She stepped into the kitchen and immediately began crying. I didn't know. I was growing tired of those words. I didn't know about the petition. I believe you. I didn't know about the house. I looked at her carefully. That one. I wasn't sure I believed. She sat at the table where she had done homework 30 years earlier. The card stopped working, and everything exploded. Money often tells the truth. She looked down. I thought Amanda was helping. So did Grant. And you? I asked it gently. Her answer took time. I thought if I didn't ask questions, nobody would make me choose sides. There it was, Claire's great weakness. Avoidance. She had not been cruel. She had been absent. Sometimes absence wounds just as deeply. She looked around the kitchen. It feels smaller. I smiled sadly. No, we're bigger. She laughed through tears. Do you hate us? The question again. My children all asked it. Not what they had done. Not what I felt. Only whether they remained lovable. I hate what happened. She nodded. That's fair. For nearly an hour we talked. Not about money. Not about the trust. Not about lawyers. We talked about Thomas. About childhood. About fear. Claire finally admitted something. I always thought Amanda was stronger than you. That surprised me. Why? Because she controlled everything. I looked around my kitchen. The company I built. The house I paid for. The family I carried. The grief I survived. Perhaps my children had confused control with strength. Amanda certainly had. But strength is often quieter. It endures. It builds. It stays. As the sun began setting, Claire stood. Are you coming back? The question lingered. I looked around my home. Then I thought about Magnolia Grove, Denise, Linda, the residents, the unexpected peace. I don't know yet. She nodded. For once. She accepted uncertainty. After she left, Jonathan and I sat quietly. The house had become golden with evening light, the same light that had filled it for decades. What do you want? He finally asked. I looked toward the staircase, toward Thomas's chair, toward the photographs, toward the future. For weeks, everyone had asked what should happen to me. Perhaps it was finally time to ask what I wanted. I want to choose my own life. Jonathan smiled. That sounds reasonable. I laughed softly. It took 72 years to become reasonable. As darkness settled outside, I locked my own front door, my key, my house, my decision. For the first time since entering Magnolia Grove, I realized something important. My children had placed me in a nursing home, but they had never truly taken my life. I had simply forgotten that it still belonged to me. 2 weeks later, I moved back home. Not because my children asked me to, not because the lawyers finished, not because the trust issues had been resolved. I moved back because one morning I woke up in Magnolia Grove, looked at the sunlight coming through my window, and realized something important. I was no longer afraid. Fear had been the thing keeping me there. Fear of conflict. Fear of being alone. Fear that my children would think I was difficult. Fear that setting boundaries would make me selfish. But fear had finally become smaller than truth. Jonathan met me at the house that Saturday morning. Denise hugged me before I left Magnolia Grove. Linda cried a little. Eleanor gave me a crossword book. Frank shook my hand. Ruth slipped peppermint candies into my purse. I suppose we're losing you, Denise said. I smiled. No, I think I finally found myself. That surprised both of us, because it surprised me too. The house felt different this time. Not because it had changed, because I had. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside carrying only one suitcase. The same suitcase my children had watched me pack before taking me away. Only now, I carried it because I chose to. Jonathan set several folders on the kitchen table. The audit is complete. Those words carried enormous weight. Complete. Weeks earlier, those records had looked like numbers. Now they looked like a map. Amanda, Grant, Claire. Years of spending. Years of entitlement. Years of assumptions. Do I need to read everything? No. What do I need to know? Jonathan sat down. Amanda used approximately $400,000 in discretionary expenses over 7 years. I closed my eyes. Grant, approximately $900,000. My heart sank. And Claire, a little over $200,000. Nearly $1.5 million. Not stolen exactly. Not legally, but certainly not responsibly. So, what happens now? Jonathan folded his hands. That depends on you. There it was again. My choice. After months of everyone deciding what should happen to Rebecca Sterling, the decisions belonged to me. I walked to the kitchen window. Thomas had planted roses beneath that window 30 years earlier. They still bloomed every spring. They had survived storms, heat, insects, neglect. Perhaps families were supposed to survive too. Can they repay it? Jonathan answered honestly. Grant cannot. I nodded. I assumed. Amanda could repay some, and Claire. With time, I stood quietly. Money. Always money. Yet somehow the story had never really been about money. It had been about value. What was I worth once I became old? What was my voice worth? What was my home worth? What was my love worth? That afternoon, I invited my children to the house. All three. Jonathan attended. No lawyers for them. No arguments. No surprises. The dining room looked exactly as it had the night they first suggested Magnolia Grove. The same chandelier, the same table, the same walls. Only the people had changed. Amanda arrived first. She looked tired, not defeated, simply tired. Grant came next. He had lost weight. Claire arrived carrying a peach pie, my favorite. She remembered. That mattered. We sat together in silence for several moments. No one seemed to know how to begin. Finally, I spoke. I have read the audit. Amanda lowered her eyes. Grant looked at the table. Claire held her hands together. I know the numbers. Nobody answered. I know about the expenses. Still silence. I know about the house. Amanda began crying immediately. I know about the petition. Grant closed his eyes. I know about the locksmith. That surprised Amanda. She looked up quickly. How? Because this is still my house. No one spoke. The clock in the hallway ticked, exactly the same way it had ticked during the dinner when my children first tried to convince me to leave. Only now, the truth sat with us. I looked at Amanda. You carried too much after your father died. Her tears increased. I know that now. She covered her mouth. I should have protected you from becoming responsible for everyone. But you do not get to control people because you are afraid. She nodded. I know. I turned to Grant. You were drowning. His eyes filled. Yes. You asked for help until asking became taking. I know. I looked at Claire. You disappeared. She began crying. Yes. For several moments. Nobody moved. Then I said the thing I had rehearsed for days. The trust will change. Amanda looked up. Grant sat straighter. Claire stopped crying. Jonathan opened a folder. The discretionary access accounts are permanently closed. Nobody argued. The company ownership structure will change. Grant lowered his head. The house will remain mine while I live. Amanda nodded. The inheritance structure will become conditional. That surprised them. What does that mean? Claire asked. I looked at my children. It means inheritance is no longer automatic. Silence. Family counseling. Amanda blinked. Financial responsibility. Grant swallowed. Individual accountability. Claire wiped her eyes. And if we refuse, Amanda asked quietly. I answered honestly. Then I leave everything to charity. Nobody spoke. For the first time in many years, my children understood something. Their mother had choices. Amanda finally whispered. You would really do that? I smiled sadly. I almost lost my family trying to buy one. The room became very quiet. Then something happened I had not expected. Amanda stood up. She walked around the table. She knelt beside my chair. My daughter had not knelt beside me since she was a child. She took my hand. I am sorry. Not polished, not careful, not strategic. Just broken. Grant stood too. I am sorry. Claire joined them. I am sorry. 3 grown children. 3 damaged adults. 3 frightened people who had forgotten their mother was still human. I looked down at them. Forgiveness is strange. People imagine it arrives dramatically. Music, tears, embrace. But sometimes forgiveness arrives quietly, like opening a locked door. Not because the people outside deserve entry, because you no longer wish to live inside the room alone. I forgive you, I said. Amanda cried harder. Grant covered his eyes. Claire held my hand. Then I added the most important words. But forgiveness is not permission. All 3 nodded. That evening, after they left, Jonathan stayed behind. Well, he asked. I sat in Thomas's chair. The house felt alive again. Not perfect, not repaired, but alive. I think we're beginning. Beginning what I looked around the room. The photographs, the clock, the walls, the life, a different family. Jonathan smiled. Those are usually the better kind. After he left, I walked through the house alone. I opened windows. I dusted shelves. I watered plants. Ordinary things, sacred things. Near midnight, I climbed the stairs and entered my bedroom. Thomas's photograph sat beside the bed. I picked it up. They finally saw me. I whispered. Outside. The wind moved through the trees. The same trees that had watched my children grow. The same trees that watched them fail. Perhaps they would watch them change too. Because this story had begun with children leaving their mother in a nursing home. But it was ending somewhere much harder, with children finally realizing their mother had never stopped being the strongest person in the family. And with a woman who finally understood that love without boundaries eventually teaches people to forget your worth. I placed Thomas's photograph back on the nightstand. Tomorrow would bring new conversations, new rules, new pain, perhaps even healing. But tonight, for the first time in months, I slept in my own bed, and nobody could take that away from me. 6 months later, my children came to dinner, not because they had to, not because lawyers arranged it, not because money required it. They came because they wanted to. That sentence still feels strange to write. The house looked different by then. Not dramatically. I had not remodeled anything. I had not sold it. I had not turned it into a monument to survival. I had simply begun living in it again. The roses outside the kitchen window had bloomed. The porch had been repaired. The old piano had been tuned. And for the first time in years, the silence inside the house no longer felt lonely. It felt peaceful. Much had changed during those 6 months. Amanda resigned from 2 charity boards. Grant sold several properties and entered financial counseling. Claire took a teaching position at a community art center instead of depending on gallery sales and family support. The trust had been rewritten. The company board had been reorganized. The discretionary accounts remained closed. None of the children received automatic access to anything. Some people would call that punishment. I called it adulthood. Family counseling had been difficult. Some sessions ended in tears. Some ended in silence. Amanda once walked out. Grant once shouted. Claire once cried for an entire hour. I cried too. Not because I regretted what I had done, because healing often hurts more than pretending. One evening during therapy, the counselor asked Amanda a question. When did you stop seeing your mother as your mother? Amanda answered quietly. When I started seeing her as the person responsible for keeping everyone safe. The counselor looked at me. And when did you stop seeing yourself as a person? That question followed me home, because perhaps I had. Perhaps I had become mother first, provider second, protector third, and Rebecca somewhere very far behind. Now Rebecca had returned. Not younger, not stronger, not untouched. Simply present. On the afternoon of our dinner, I stood in my kitchen preparing food. Chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, biscuits, peach pie. The same meal my family had eaten dozens of times. Only now, I cooked because I wanted to. Not because I feared disappointment. Not because I hoped food would hold everyone together. The front door opened at 6. Grant entered first carrying flowers. Real flowers. Not expensive ones. Just yellow daisies. These reminded me of Dad, he said. Thomas had loved yellow flowers. I accepted them. Thank you. Claire brought homemade bread. Amanda brought nothing. For a brief moment, the old Amanda appeared inside my mind. Then she smiled awkwardly. I wasn't sure what to bring. I looked at her. Yourself is fine. Her eyes filled slightly. Some wounds never disappear entirely. Dinner was quiet at first. Not uncomfortable. Just careful. Like people learning how to walk again after injuries. Grant spoke about work. Real work. Not investments. He had accepted a position with a construction company and no longer owned anything grand enough to lose. Claire talked about her students. One little girl painted horses every day. One boy drew dinosaurs. She smiled while telling the stories. Amanda mostly listened. That surprised me. She had spent most of her life leading conversations. Now she allowed them to happen. After dinner, we moved into the living room. Thomas's chair remained beside the fireplace. Nobody sat in it. Some traditions survive everything. Amanda looked around the room. I thought this house would eventually belong to one of us. I nodded. I know. She looked at me. I think I spent years waiting for my future to begin. And it already had. The honesty touched me. Grant leaned forward. I thought money would save me, Claire added quietly. I thought someone else always would. They all looked at me. I smiled sadly. And I thought giving more would make you feel loved. Silence. The clock ticked. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Amanda finally spoke. Mom, why didn't you tell us no sooner? That question deserved an honest answer. Because I was afraid. They looked surprised. You? Yes. Afraid of what? Claire asked. I looked at my children. The same thing every mother fears. What? Losing you. Amanda began crying. Not dramatically. Simply, honestly. But you almost lost us anyway. I know. The truth sat quietly among us. Love without boundaries had nearly destroyed us. Control had nearly destroyed Amanda. Fear had nearly destroyed Grant. Avoidance had nearly destroyed Claire. And sacrifice had nearly destroyed me. The telephone rang. For a moment, nobody moved. Then I laughed. I suppose life still exists outside this room. Grant smiled. Should I answer? No. The call stopped. The house remained quiet. The old house. The house my children once planned to sell. The house they once thought belonged to their future. The house that had patiently waited for all of us to become honest. Later that evening, Amanda asked something unexpected. Would you ever go back to Magnolia Grove? I thought about Denise, Linda, Eleanor, Frank, Ruth, the small room, the courtyard, the fountain, the place where my children left me, the place where I found myself. Yes, I said. They all looked surprised. Why? Because some very good people live there. Amanda nodded slowly. I used to think it was a place people went to disappear. So did I. And now, I smiled. Now I think it's where I remembered who I was. Around 10 o'clock, my children prepared to leave. The same front door, the same porch, the same driveway. Only this time, nobody carried my suitcase. Nobody took my keys. Nobody decided my future. Amanda hugged me first. A real hug. Not strategic. Not apologetic. Simply her. I love you. I know. Grant hugged me next. I'm still working on everything. So am I. Claire held my hands. Thank you for not giving up on us. I thought carefully before answering. I did give up on some things. She looked confused. What things? The idea that love means saving everyone. Her eyes filled. Then they left. I stood on the porch watching their cars disappear. Months earlier, I had watched those same cars leave Magnolia Grove. That day, they carried my heartbreak. Tonight, they carried something else. Responsibility. The stars appeared above the trees. The neighborhood grew quiet. Inside the house, the dishes waited. The flowers stood on the table. The clock continued ticking. I climbed the stairs slowly. Age still lived in my knees. Arthritis still lived in my hands. Loss still lived in my heart. Healing does not erase anything. It simply teaches us to carry it differently. In my bedroom, Thomas's photograph rested beside the lamp. I sat on the bed and looked at him. They came home, I whispered. Perhaps he already knew. Perhaps he had always known. Because Thomas understood something I learned far too late. Families are not saved by money. They are not saved by sacrifice. They are not saved by fear. They survive only when truth becomes more important than comfort. My children left me in a nursing home. Their luxury cards stopped working. Their lives fell apart. And for a while, so did mine. But sometimes losing everything false is the only way to discover what remains true. I remained. My home remained. My voice remained. My children remained. Changed. Wounded. Humbled. But still mine. And as I turned off the light and lay down in my own bed, I realized something that would have seemed impossible months earlier. I was grateful. Not for the betrayal, not for the pain, not for Magnolia Grove. I was grateful that, at 72 years old, I finally learned that being loved and being used are not the same thing. And once you know the difference, nobody can ever take your life away again. There comes a moment in many lives when we discover that love and sacrifice are not the same thing. For years, I believed that being a good mother meant giving more, fixing more, forgiving more, and asking for less. I believed my worth came from how much I could provide. I thought my children would automatically understand the cost of everything I gave them. But love without boundaries can slowly teach people to stop seeing the person who gives. Growing older does not make us less valuable. Needing help does not erase our dignity. And protecting ourselves does not mean we love our families less. Sometimes the bravest thing a parent can do is say no. Sometimes the kindest thing we can give our children is accountability. Forgiveness is important, but forgiveness without change only repeats the pain. Real healing begins when truth enters the room and everyone is willing to see it. If you are a parent, please remember your life still belongs to you. Your voice still matters. Your dreams still matter. Your home, your choices, your dignity, and your peace matter. And if you are a son or daughter watching this story, remember that parents do not become less human simply because they grow older. They still feel fear. They still need respect. They still deserve to be seen. The greatest inheritance parents leave behind is not money. It is character. It is honesty. It is love that includes boundaries. And sometimes families do not heal because everyone becomes perfect. They heal because someone finally becomes honest. Before you leave, I would truly love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to set boundaries with someone you loved? What would you have done if you were Rebecca? Please share your story, your feelings, and where you're watching from. If this story touched your heart, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and returning for more stories about family, resilience, forgiveness, and finding strength later in life. No matter your age, it is never too late to reclaim your voice.